Yes.
The Lithuanian army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. This is Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1631 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news coming out of Russia, Crimea, and Iran. And right now we're seeing that massive strikes exploded over 4+ Russian warships in the major port of Novorossiysk last night. And we just got the damage reports today, and it is absolutely wild what's taking place there. Also, the Crimea crisis is now worsening amid brand new fuel shortages erupting across Russia. And Putin just threatened today to seize NATO ships in response to the Russian ships getting seized around the world from the Shadow Fleet. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to get major news from the Eastern European region, the Middle East, and also Western Europe over the course of the past 24 hours. News has emerged that Ukrainian attacks have continued against the port of Novorossiysk over the course of this day, which has resulted in severe damage to an entire Russian fleet, the remainder of the Black Sea Fleet, based out of Vostochny Rayon within the port of Novorossiysk. Very much in line with the analysis that was given last night that the Ukrainians were attempting to target and destroy missile launchers and Russian naval vessels used in cruise missile attacks against the state of Ukraine. And the damage was significant, as 4 Russian vessels have been confirmed to have taken severe damage from direct attacks aboard the ships, and it does appear that most of these ships may have been rendered inoperable to some extent due to the damage that has been faced. Major damage was also raking up across the entirety of the port of Novorossiysk, with the grain silos near to the rail yards also being hit, and a major roadway overpass near to the area also collapsing as well as a result of one of the attacks. In the meantime, more footage came out of the situation around Novorossiysk and the air defense attempt that was made by Russian air defenses, while the Novorossiysk city authorities have now declared a state of emergency due to the situation. Also, one important note is that the Russian Federation was still working off of the grain silos in the port of Novorossiysk to be able to export grain, a major revenue source for the Russian economy and the Russian government. With this facility now being knocked possibly entirely out of operation, Russian military bloggers are now stating that the economic situation is most likely hopeless, as with the lack of oil exports, the lack of refined fuels inside of Russia, and now the lack of another critical export category, grain, another raw aggregate, they are now seeing that the economy may be in a free fall of which it cannot recover from due to the extreme damage that has been caused to multiple different industries. At the same time, the Orsk refinery has also been confirmed to have been shut down, and it appears that the condenser towers at that refinery complex have taken significant damage from Ukrainian strikes over the course of yesterday. We have also seen that Vladimir Putin today arrived in Novorossiysk, and security is now being ramped up around his visits as they now shut down the street that his motorcade was going to be traveling on nearly a day or two before he even arrived and traveled to the meeting inside of Novorossiysk, showing that the Russian Federation is becoming more and more concerned about the ability for the Ukrainian armed forces to conduct long-range attacks deep inside of the Russian Federation, and they're also noticing the increased efficacy of Ukrainian assassination attacks which have been conducted against Russian top officials over the past several weeks at an increasing volume and an increasing percentage rate of success. In Moscow City, we also were able to hear that the Russian government has now warned the European Union that if they continue to seize ships, the Russian Navy may start to seize European Union vessels and liquidate them to be able to cover the costs and losses of shadow tankers that are being seized at sea. With the desperation the Russian government is beginning to show amid the flurry of Ukrainian attacks being conducted against their country, we have seen that the NATO forces are beginning a meeting inside of Brussels, Belgium, to discuss the drone violations that were conducted in Poland and Romania, and to start planning a front-wide attempt of a defense against the Russians, which it is still believed a major provocation is inevitable with at some time this fall. The Lithuania has now extended their defensive networks and fortresses even deeper inside of the country as they prepare for a possible war with the Russian Federation in one of the hottest points of a potential battlefield, the Suwalki Gap. We've also seen that U.S. forces today conducted a military exercise with the state of Ukraine inside of the Federal Republic of Germany, in which a U.S. armored brigade was completely wiped out in the war game by Ukrainian forces using drone tactics and drone warfare, of which the U.S. Army still has not implemented in any major scale. And it is once again showing, even in these war games, that there is a significant failing and weak point for NATO forces and the U.S. Army with their lack of an availability for drone defenses and also drone offensive capabilities. In the meantime, Ukrainian armed forces also continued to hold the line and wreaked havoc and devastation along Russian supply lines in the south, destroying a large number of new trucks along the M14 highway and continuing to ensure that the name The Highway to Hell is an appropriate one for the M14. Outside of all of this news in Europe and further on down in the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran is now becoming emboldened due to the U.S. lack of action and the U.S.'s position so far in the standoff with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Islamic Republic of Iran now made a very serious threat today that if the United States of America conducts another attack on Iranian soil, the Islamic Republic of Iran will conduct an attack on U.S. soil, most likely using some form of guerrilla force or a terrorist group to be able to carry out the attack here inside of the United States of America. And for every attack that the United States conducts, they may conduct an attack here on the U.S. mainland with some sort of terrorist groups that are operating inside of the country. They have also made other significant threats throughout the course of the day as well, and have also made it clear that they are not negotiating with the United States of America and that the Strait of Hormuz is not open. While this was being said, U.S. officials appear to be living in La La Land, as the president today stated that, in fact, the United States is going to take the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, and although we declared yesterday, according to the president, that the strait was entirely open and we controlled it, now we are going to go into the process of taking it from them today, and then running it as a U.S.-run strait indefinitely, basically replacing the Iranian overlords of the strait with U.S. overlords instead. We also were able to hear from behind the scenes, U.S. officials that had spoken to the president are now stating that he has got a brand new strategy, which is the sit back and do nothing strategy, and just see if the Iranians will eventually fold under the pressure of a U.S. blockade at the entrance of the Gulf of Oman. Additionally, anti-ship missiles were fired by IRGC forces once again into the Strait of Hormuz, showing that they are still conducting hostilities against commercial shipping attempting to even get near to the strait, and we've also seen that another security incident of some sort has unfolded in Baghdad as of late. Additionally, we also were able to hear that there were airstrikes conducted by the Israeli Air Force today in southern Lebanon, and the Yemeni Houthis have continued their hostile actions, as they have once again put out another threat against the Saudis, and we are now seeing that they are beginning to showcase their FPV drones, similar to in design of those used in the Russian Federation, as they announced that they have the upper hand against the Yemeni government and will be using their drone superiority and missile superiority to create a superiority of firepower where they may be able to push back against the Yemeni government and take even further ground within western Yemen near to the Houthi lands. We have significant news to cover over this day, and of course, folks, we're going to be starting with the largest stories first and then getting our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But I'm sure many of y'all can tell we have quite a lot of large stories, so we're mostly going to just be moving through major stories probably for the entirety of the stream, but because there isn't really a small story to be had for today. So moving us on into the news, in our largest story, we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted what can only be described as an unbelievably successful attack against the Russian Black Sea Fleet in the port of Novorossiysk. Many people will remember that the Russian Black Sea Fleet's permanent port of basing is not in Novorossiysk, it is actually inside the port of Sevastopol, here at the southern end of the Crimean Peninsula. Due to Ukrainian drone attacks that were being conducted by the latter part of 2023, the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet headquarters and the Russian Black Sea Fleet itself had decided that Sevastopol was too dangerous of a location to be able to keep the fleet in, and so they moved the entirety of the remaining combat portion of the fleet, submarines and surface warships, from Sevastopol into the Vostochny Rayon in Novorossiysk. The concept at the time was that Novorossiysk was outside of Ukrainian drone attack capabilities in terms of range, and this would buy the Russian Federation the ability to keep the remainder of its naval projection power in the Black Sea Fleet intact throughout the remainder of the war, without it coming under the threat of some sort of a direct attack or destruction at the hand of Ukrainian drone forces, which had already racked up significant losses for the Russian Black Sea Fleet inside of Sevastopol at their moorings, with several Rapucha-class landing ships and a couple of surface combatants, including a Kilo-class submarine, being hit and destroyed within the port during that time of the earlier phase of the war. Recently, we have started to see that the Ukrainian armed forces have been attacking Novorossiysk heavily, but they've never directly attacked the Vostochny Rayon. This has been a target that's largely been avoided throughout most of the conflict for some sort of an unknown strategic reason, and instead the Ukrainian armed forces have attacked the oil loading ports just to the south of the Vostochny Rayon, Grushovaya Balka on the other side of the mountain range which stores the oil for that port, and we have also seen that other attacks have been conducted along the port facilities just north of the Vostochny Rayon, but once again, not a single one had largely attempted, at least at this point, to go all in on a direct attack at Vostochny Rayon. Intermittently, a drone would fly into the area and possibly hit a ship or get close to damaging one, but it was never a full-blown attack directed at this Black Sea Fleet basing facility. We have now seen that over the course of last night and today, Ukrainian armed forces conducted the largest drone attack against the remainder of the Russian Black Sea Fleet that has been seen in the history of the conflict. And this attack was, to suffice to say, folks, quite serious in the amount of damage that's inflicted against Russian surface vessels that were operating out of the port. We were able to see some footage showing the air defenses, or more so, the lack of air defenses around the area, and the explosions that occurred in Novorossiysk overnight. This one actually being seen very close to the Vostochny Rayon when the explosion occurred, and it's actually believed that this is one of the explosions that happened directly alongside the hull of one of the vessels when one of the AN-196s used in the attack made impact with the starboard side of the ship and apparently caused some extreme damage to the actual hull and not just the superstructure. We were able to hear that at that point, the Admiral Makarov and the Admiral Essen, which are both Admiral Grigorovich-class frigates, had most likely been hit as a result of this explosion here, and both of these vessels are some of the larger capital ships that the Russian Federation has left inside of the entirety of the Black Sea Fleet. To show you all these ships, this is actually a picture of the namesake of the class, the Admiral Grigorovich itself, but the Admiral Essen and also the Admiral Makarov are both of identical design to the Admiral Grigorovich and have been used by the Russian Federation to some limited extent throughout the remainder of the war as something of a floating missile base. What the Russian Federation does in most instances in the modern day of using these vessels is that they will take them out of the Vostochny Rayon, sail them right outside the bay, fire off a couple of KH-101 caliber cruise missiles at the state of Ukraine, and then they'll immediately turn around and head right back to the Vostochny Rayon. This sort of a tactic is designed to be able to mitigate the risk that is posed to these vessels by Ukrainian autonomous drone attacks, which could target them and hit them at sea at really any given moment, and it's also to try and put them under the significant air defense umbrella, or at least significant as far as the Russians look at it, that they've been able to build around the Vostochny Rayon and the port of Novorossiysk, which in theory was supposed to be able to keep them safe. I think y'all can all get an idea from this picture here. It didn't keep them safe. We also got to see more of the air defense fire from another film that was made after we went off air last night, showing the air defenses still trying to work against these incoming drones, largely in vain, as the satellite photography is about to show us here in a moment.
Oh, wow, look at that, too. It looks like the spotlights are actually coming from the area of the port itself where the ships are actually docked.
Yeah, you know, that's something quite interesting. There's actually a couple of these spotlights apparently based out here on these piers that look to be under construction at this point, and it looks like they put a couple of spotlights there, and most of the machine gun fire, folks, that we were able to see came from around this area right here, and also from this area right here as well. So it looks like they just have a humongous number of machine guns based around the Vostochny Rayon, and they're hoping that by volume of fire alone, they will be able to deal with the incoming drones. That didn't pan out.
Yeah, that definitely didn't pan out for sure. Also, by the way, part of the reason why Russia had such a hard time trying to shoot down the incoming Ukrainian drones last night is because Ukraine was using a whole bunch of jet drones. They were using also apparently some missiles too to come in here and hit this area. So they were using some of the normal propeller-driven drones, but those jet drones are nearly impossible to shoot down with the Gush guns they're using on the coast. So they basically didn't stand a chance, and that's why 4+ ships got hit. I'm just really shocked that the submarines didn't get struck during that process.
It is pretty interesting that they didn't get hit, and we honestly, folks, don't really know why they were avoided to be hit this time. But to show y'all something else that's interesting, this is actually a clip. I'll have to mute the audio here, but this is actually a clip of one of the AN-196s, or an FP-1, flying on in towards the Vostochny Rayon today, as the attack continued on for multiple hours with multiple different waves of drone attacks coming into the area and attempting their hits on the port facility. And we understand that some of those hits were the ones that actually landed on the vessels in the Vostochny Rayon and caused some significant damage. And so it's now time for us to actually get into the damage assessment. This is the list of ships that are claimed to be damaged at this point and a picture of each. So from what we understand, these are the 4 vessels that the Ukrainian General Staff are claiming have been hit and damaged from the drone attack that was conducted last night. The Admiral Grigorovich class frigates Makarov and Essen, which you can see here at the top end of the screen, that would be hull number 799 and 751. We also understand that a Boyan M class corvette, hull number 562, may have also been hit and damaged as well, and a Vasily Baikov class corvette, which unfortunately this hull number is not the accurate one for the vessel that was hit in the port, was also hit and damaged as well as a result of the strike. As far as this goes, and I know a lot of y'all are going to look at these vessels and y'all are going to go, they don't look that big. Like, they don't look like early Burke-sized destroyers. I mean, they're not that big. But for the Russian Navy and what's left of it in the Black Sea Fleet, these are basically the biggest ships that are left. Actually, let me prove that to y'all here really quickly by going to the Black Sea Fleet and show y'all what is publicly understood to be a part of the current fleet in the modern day. So let me show y'all the biggest ship that was once in the class, and then I'll show y'all what they have right now in the present day. So let me see if I can get that list here, folks. If I can find it here really quickly. Oh man, let's see here. We want. All right, so dang, they got everything divided up. I wish I could show y'all, folks. I was trying to find something here about it, but it doesn't look like they have an easy list for us to go and look at to be able to show y'all the ships. But the largest ship, just to cut it down short, because I was hoping to show y'all visually, but the largest ship that the Russian Black Sea Fleet had outside of these being the largest one next to the biggest, was the Moskva, which was sunk in the summer of 2022 by Ukrainian drone attacks that were conducted near to the coast of Odessa. These are the biggest vessels next to the Moskva in the Black Sea Fleet, including the Krivik 5s, which are what the Admiral Grigorovich class really is. So the loss is quite significant for the Russian Federation, and we were able to get a little bit of satellite photography showing that the ships had been damaged. This satellite picture here showing scarring and clear hull damage to the bow of both vessels from what appears to be two separate drone strikes that were able to hit the ships, or were able to hit one of the ships and then cause indirect moderate damage to the next vessel.
That's just wild, really.
It really is. We also got a picture here showing that the Baikov class vessel, the Vasily Baikov, had also been damaged as well, and we were able to see clear burn damage to the midships area of its superstructure, and also what appears to be smoke, or more so smoke particulates that had built up along the entirety of the superstructure and hull of the vessel. To make this clear, folks, this looks to be a hit that hit the starboard side of the ship, and the fire and its smoke then swept over across the ship to its port side, and that's why we see the smoke residue along most of the hull here in the midships area of the vessel. So in the satellite photography alone, we are able to see these two Admiral Grigorovich class frigates and also the Vasily Baikov class having suffered direct hits and damage as a result of the attacks last night. Also note that the Vasily Baikov's turret appears to be somewhat odd. I don't really know how to describe this, folks, but it looks like the turret may have had some of its shielding burned off, and I'll show y'all why I'm saying that, because if we go over here to the pictures of the ships that are claimed damage, notice that it does have a casing for the turret, or more so a turret housing built around it, which is generally something of a plexiglass structure or something along those lines. It's not armored at all, and it looks like that may have burned away, because there is absolutely really nothing. We can actually see the breech of the gun itself right there, and what appears to be some sort of weird crimping on the deck where the turret ring would have been. That looks to be the turret that is actually burned off the vessel as a result of the fire, possibly, and the heat that came from it. Also kind of wild to think that a turret can just melt like that. It wasn't even the area where the fire happened, but it looks like the turret melted off, so they may not even be able to operate the main gun of the Vasily Baikov, possibly. But nevertheless, that is some of the satellite photography showing the damage within this port. And to show y'all one last thing that we have here, we were able to see another clip of the air defenses that were going off around the port during the attack last night.
What the heck is that noise?
I think it's music.
Is it music? It's like a jazz or something like that, like a saxophone or something in the background. Like literally, like the meme, the saxophones are getting louder in the background as this is going on. But it's, now granted, I did say earlier that it's really not a shock that Russia wasn't able to shoot down the jet drones because they're moving so fast toward their targets. It's hard to hit it with just, sheer eyesight and targeting with your eyes like that with the naked eye. But at the same time, though, you would think that maybe their luck would eventually come to fruition, because I mean they're literally firing at every single direction possible. They're wildly flinging around the spotlights. Like, it seems like at least something would have been hit, but it doesn't appear that even that happened.
Man, it's absolutely crazy. Like, we talked about this last night, folks, but to talk about it again, it's a little bit interesting that they aren't hitting anything, because the concept that we know the Russians are working off of is the volume of fire principle, or more so the volume of fire doctrine in air defense, which means, in a sense, the air defense gunners may not be accurate, but we're going to have so many of them that are firing off their guns at the exact same time, one of them will have to hit something. That's the general philosophy behind the volume of fire concept when it comes to air defenses. And even though they are definitely emphasizing volume of fire, they still don't hit anything. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose. It's like, what is the point of having volume of fire when everybody is still missing the target every single time? I think the volume of fire principle at this point maybe has less than a 10% efficiency rate of actually targeting and shooting down a drone, meaning that they're expending humongous amounts of ammunition to be able to achieve quite literally nothing most of the time. And we saw that this air defense hardly shot down a thing last night. We believe it shot down maybe 2 drones out of the dozens that were used in this attack, which is quite an abysmal interception rate. That is below 10%. But to get us through the rest of this clip here, and also to figure out if that's a saxophone, it sounds like it kind of is, so we're just going to mute that there. But that was a little bit of the air defense. Before I get y'all into the on-the-ground footage that was taken at the naval base showing some of the damage in the nearby area, we actually do have a poll talking about this very incident and major historical attack that was conducted on the Black Sea Fleet, or what's left of it, in Novorossiysk. And a lot of people seem to be putting in their thoughts that the Russian Navy might be gone for good. And well, at least the Black Sea Fleet portion of it. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so during last night's attack on Novorossiysk, we saw the grain facility get absolutely decimated. We saw that last night and covered that live on the air. But we were wondering, was the Russian Navy properly hit? And we found out today, literally in this footage here from satellite imagery, that apparently 4+ Russian warships, some pretty large ones by the way, were hit by drones and missiles apparently. So what are your thoughts about what that's going to mean for the Russian Navy? 41% said the Black Sea Fleet is now permanently gone, basically, while 32% said it's a good hit for propaganda purposes, and 20% said nothing much changed and it's kind of meh when it really comes to the effect of it. And I would say personally, I'm with the 41%. I think the Black Sea Fleet is permanently gone at this point, not because the ships are sunk or they're permanently disabled, but I mean, they literally had to run from Crimea over to Novorossiysk, and that was a panic move. They had to get over there to get out of the range of Ukrainian drones. Now Ukrainian drones have expanded their range, and now Novorossiysk is now also under attack on a regular basis. And this was a very large attack that we saw, and clearly with the air defense going wild like that, they weren't prepared for it, to say the least, and clearly the ships got hit, so it was a huge failure. So I would say, for all intent and purposes, the Black Sea Fleet is largely useless at this point, and it's basically a sitting duck and a huge liability for the Russians to a large degree, at least in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the Black Sea Fleet has largely been removed from the history at this point because of the tremendous losses that they've taken. From what we know, it was around 40% of the hulls that were in the Black Sea Fleet that had already been lost in 2022 and 2023 in the war, and the remaining 50% for the most part were moved to the Vostochny Rayon. Now we've seen that they've taken another 4 capital ships, if we were to call them what they really are in the Black Sea, as losses overnight. And it doesn't really seem like they're going to be having much left. They have a couple of coastal patrol vessels that are still going to be operational, and most of the Kilo-class submarines have avoided destruction throughout the war. They had 6 of them at the start, and we now understand that they have 5. One of them was lost completely from an attack on a dry dock in Sevastopol a couple of years ago, so they don't really have a lot left. The submarines could roll out from the Vostochny Rayon every once in a while and conduct a cruise missile attack against the state of Ukraine. They are capable of firing KH-101s, and we have seen them do that in the past near Novorossiysk. But the volume of fire is going to be significantly reduced because of this damage. These vessels may not be operational due to the specific hits that were had, which were near to the superstructures of the vessels, mostly on the starboard side from what we were able to tell, and that explosion may have been able to create a fire that affected the main computer frame of the vessel, which could be affecting a large amount of the fire control and weapons control systems on board, as most of them are routed through and operated through the main computer frame inside the vessel. Also, another thing that I have to add, folks, is that some people might say, oh, well, they're ships. They're going to take them to a dry dock, literally just up here, and they're going to refit them, and they're going to be right back into service. But the thing, folks, is that modern warships really are not designed like the ships of old that you hear about in the history books, where they could take a couple of hits, you could bring them back to port, refit them, repair them, and then send them back out to sea, and they'd be totally fine. If the main computer frame has been burned out on these vessels, and we understand the computer components are exceedingly difficult for Russia to get in the modern day, they probably will be without a hope in hell of actually repairing these ships and getting them back into operation, because the computer systems that actually run the weaponry on board and also the fire control computers will no longer be operational. They may have been burned out as a result of the fires. So I would say that the Russian Black Sea Fleet, in an effective sense, has been completely removed from the pages of history and really is a fleet only on paper, and it's more, if we were to describe it aptly at this point, a coastal patrol flotilla than anything else, really, to be entirely honest, which is kind of crazy to think, folks, because the Black Sea Fleet is one of the most famous fleets in the whole Russian Navy, I would say next to the Baltic Fleet and maybe the Arctic Fleet. And it's crazy to think that we basically watched through the whole war, the Ukrainians slowly whittle away at that until there's basically nothing left. It may as well just be the Coast Guard down there at this point with the Vasily Baikovs that are left, because maybe they'll be able to stop the Ukrainian drone boats from skittering up on shore if they ever wanted to, but everything outside of that's going to be impossible for them from this point, or they won't really be able to conduct anything effectively as far as combat actions or power projection in the war and in the post-war era. But moving us on out of that poll, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have from the port of Novorossiysk, because there was actually a lot more to cover today, including that attack and other attacks that were conducted in the port overnight. We were able to see a video that was apparently filmed near to the area of the naval base, and it showed a little bit of the damage that had been caused nearby to it. Here's that clip.
What the heck kind of car is that right here that's gotten blown up? That's weird. It almost looks like a Lancia.
Man, beats me. But man, that spoiler is definitely aftermarket.
Yeah, really, that's weird. That's also, by the way, this place right here has been decimated. I heard they've declared a state of emergency in Novorossiysk as a whole, because apparently some infrastructure also like exploded, like some water mains and stuff like that. So apparently it's chaos across the entire city.
Oh yeah, they did actually. It is pretty bad out there. We'll be getting to that here in a little bit, folks. But it is pretty bad out here at this point with damage.
Man, this damage was so bad, somebody stole the tire straight off of it.
Man, you can't hit shit in Novorossiysk.
I think somebody might have been an opportunist and he took advantage of the chaos, and he might have tried to steal the guy's wheel, because I don't think that fell off during the explosion.
Bro, once someone heard an explosion, man, they got up and said, "Oh, quick, get the car mechanic kit and get the pliers. We need to seal the tires and strip the copper wiring blade." Man, and they went out there and they got to work. Man, I heard, man, that they can work under fire better than the Russian Corps of Engineers. Like, they can get work done.
Yeah, really, honestly, I gotta say, oh man, I don't think they were successfully good thieves, though, as they literally stashed the tire underneath the car at that point.
Man, one of them got stuck under there, and he had to like lift the car up off of him, and he slid the tire over. He said, "Quick, let's get out of here!" But man, quite the damage. Oh, hey, yo, no
he's got some of that Moscow street beat going on.
Man, we got Biggie Blier rolling through. Hey, man, cruising down the street in my 7-4.
Orc Piggy, he's a good rapper.
And here's some smoke rising from one of the rail yards down in downtown Novorossiysk, near to this grain aggregate conveyor belt. Looks like Novorossiysk had a bad day.
Very bad day, it looks like. It must suck to be a Russian.
I think it probably does. Not that I would know a lot about it. We just look at Google Street View, but I feel like it does. We also get to see the picture of the large explosion there, which we already showed you all prior. And so moving us on up and into Novorossiysk proper, around the grain loading areas, and also near to most of the critical infrastructure that is not associated with the Russian Navy in this port, we were able to see a couple of interesting other proofs of the damage here as well, including this clip. I started a call. Man, I got it, man. I got it. Man, but this smoke don't got it. Oh. What is that?
Look at that. The smoke's hovering like right above the road. Is that another grain conveyor or something?
I think it might have been. Man, it's like an apocalypse out there. And we see what looks like a burst water main. Why is the water main above ground?
Well, everything in Russia that should be underground's above ground for the most part.
They said, it's 5 cents cheaper to put above ground. Put it above ground. Man, it's like, what the hell, man? It's like, don't they have money to put anything underground? We also got this clip here. Showing that what looks to be a conveyor belt actually collapsed onto the street.
I think that's an overpass, man. I think that's an actual car overpass.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. It looks like it to me.
But it's covered, bleed.
I think that's an overpass. So they said in the caption there, it's an overpass too.
Is it this one? Oh, let's go down the street and take a look. That one's pretty narrow. Let's see here. Any grain conveyors? Here's one. Let's see if this matches. So that's a grain conveyor. See how it has like that square kind of rigid box structure to it? Like, it doesn't look like a road overpass. It looks more like a aggregate, like, overpass, sort of a conveyor deal. like, at least from what I can see.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell.
It is kind of hard to tell, but something collapsed onto street, believe it. That's what we do know, folks. That's what we can guarantee y'all. That thing is not supposed to be on the street. We also were able to see in another clip as well from down here, the grain terminals and their condition within the city, which was shown right here, and it appears that the roofs of a couple of them had actually been blown off. And lastly, one of our last clips from the downtown area showed more of the damage at the port in some of these longer clips.
Последствия.
We see the smoke rising from the impact sites near the grain facilities across the way a couple of miles off.
I'm really surprised Ukraine decided to go for the grain facilities like that and really start slamming them like intentionally. On one hand, like I can understand, it's going to make the winter extremely hard for Russia. Is once the grain is messed up and they don't have enough for the winter and they don't stockpile it, or they're not able to ship it out, one or the other. I mean, that's going to cause a huge problem during the winter for the food supply.
It is going to cause a pretty big problem for them, but it's mostly going to be export related. At least for now, like they're gonna have the food shortage, I think, because of the oil crisis and the lack of crop harvests that are happening. This is really cutting out their export capability. Kind of wild though to think, Matthew. Like they already know that they're going to be going into a food shortage coming this winter, and they're still exporting tremendous amounts of grain out of Russia. Like they have the ability to do that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, they're trying to make money, really. I'm sure the whole grain industry inside of Russia simply is trying to make a buck at this point. I mean, they're probably going under financially.
They probably are. Like, they probably definitely are. But that's still interesting when you think about it, though. It's like they're prioritizing money-making over ensuring that the population will survive if a crippling shortage happens coming up in the winter. Seems to be the normal kind of Russian governmental mindset, though, to prioritize the state over the people, regardless of the outcome. But moving us on out of all of these clips, folks, the Russian city authorities here in Novorossiysk did declare a state of emergency as a result of the damage, and according to Visegrad24, a state of emergency has been declared in Novorossiysk after the Ukrainian drone attack. Due to the rupture of two main water mains, the city's water supply system has been damaged, and water delivery to residents has been restricted. The Novorossiysk port area is currently covered in thick smoke, as was seen in the clip that we already showed y'all. This is largely a duplicate, but he is confirming that the city is in a state of emergency as a result of the attacks. In the midst of everything that happened today, a ship that had actually been hit and heavily damaged by a Ukrainian drone at sea was actually towed into the port in the middle of the day, giving this ghastly ghost ship aura to the bay.
Man, that's perfect. Like you want to get towed into the port that just got decimated by an attack. It's like that's probably the last place the ship wanted to be taken to, and the crew probably wanted to go to. Is like they don't want to be taken to the spot that's currently getting decimated. It's like they probably want some safety.
Man, you know, the people in Novorossiysk said, man, well, at least the ships coming in still look nice. And then this thing came rolling in. They're like, oh, everything's been blown up. It's shit. Man, like, man, what a terrible fate, especially for these sailors if they were still on board that ship when it got towed in. It's like, you get towed in on a destroyed ship and you get to arrive in a destroyed city. Pretty sad, really.
Yeah, I would say extremely sad. I think at this point, if you're living in Novorossiysk, it's about time to start thinking about moving out, I would say. At least I would be moving out.
I would definitely agree, Belia. I would start packing bags if I had the ability to, but they did close the border. Well, they haven't closed the border completely yet, but they've closed the border for able-bodied men. So the able-bodied men sadly can't escape it, but the women possibly can. So if I was a woman in Russia, I'd probably be packing up and trying to leave. Maybe go on a vacation or something, I'd say. But moving us on out of the port of Novorossiysk, the Russian military bloggers are also beginning to start crashing out over the fact that the grain exports are now getting hit pretty badly. As we're able to see right here, this Russian military blogger called 13th, that's just his name, nothing else. But he has 219,000 subscribers, so a somewhat significant voice inside of Russia. And he stated the following today on Telegram. What the Ukrainians have done to our logistics in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea is nothing less than a disaster. In their operation to isolate Crimea from the mainland, the destruction of maritime logistics is just one step. I'm sure there will be others. The speed with which Magyar's henchmen have accomplished all this is truly horrific. Let's take just the facts. On July 6th, the first two ships were hit in the Sea of Azov. The next day, 12 ships were already hit. On July 10th, Russia closes the Azov-Don Canal to shipping. Also, this guy got the number a little bit wrong. It wasn't like 13 ships that got got hit, it was about 140 before they closed down the Sea of Azov. But I digress. Those numbers, they probably aren't that important, right? It's just the difference between a small flotilla and an armada of tanker vessels and cargo ships. But anyways, by July 14th, the number of damaged ships exceeded 100. On July 15th, attacks began in the Black Sea. 3 days later, the total number of damaged ships reached 172. A day later, tankers are ablaze. By August 10th, the total number of Ukrainian attacks in the Black Sea of Azov and the Black Sea had exceeded 200 damaged ships. Logistics had suffered a serious setback. Previously, about a quarter of Russia's grain transited through the Sea of Azov. Now the price of wheat is determined not by the harvest, but by the question, will the next ship reach port, unload, and return? Insurance and freight rates have skyrocketed, and some owners are now afraid to enter. Fortunately, Russia has begun striking Odessa ports. This should have been done back in 2022. They did this in 2022. Not by arranging grain deals. Ukrainians have methodically launched drone terror on land and sea, and Crimea is essentially turning into a suitcase without a handle, and logistics are suffering throughout the country. Yours, Yegor the 13th. So he actually has something more than 13th. But it looks like the Russians are crashing out about the fact that the grain exports are being shut off. And make this case for everybody here. This is another attack that the Ukrainians are doing to destroy a major institution of Russian revenue generation inside of the Russian country. They first hit the oil industry, which refines fuel to keep the whole economy running. So when the fuel shortages come around, the economy starts slowing to a crawl, because if you can get fuel, it's incredibly expensive, and you might not be able to even get fuel, meaning that the logistics of the country starts grinding to a halt. Then they started to attack Wildberries distribution facilities, which the Ukrainians claim are involved in military logistics for the Russian Federation, and are causing significant capital damage by the loss of the largest of their distribution facilities to the Wildberries company. That is also causing major economic damage as well, because if this company goes under, it's believed that it might take down the Russian financial institutions with it. Now the Ukrainians are targeting the grain export industries in the port of Novorossiysk and elsewhere in that area, and they're completely knocking out Russia's ability to export grain. And while grain is not as big as a moneymaker as oil is, grain is still one of the few ways that Russia is able to export any types of goods to the outside world, and to be able to bring money back into Russia to be able to try and keep the economy running and the war going. And without that ability, Russia is now looking basically down the barrel of a gun that's pointed right at them right now. They have no fuel to keep the war running or the economy running. The logistics facilities of Wildberries, which is basically the Amazon of Russia, have largely been destroyed, and the company might fold as a result of the significant damage that's been caused. And now they can't even export and make a measly sum off of the grain which they were still exporting and making a significant amount of money off of. And so a lot of people are wondering, what is going to be happening as a result of this sort of damage that we're seeing at this point? Are the Russians going to be in a bit of a tizzy, or are they going to be totally fine, just a little temporary setback? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So I would say their grain industry is probably very screwed at this point, because now we're seeing the Azov and Black Sea routes being blockaded by Ukrainian drones, and those attacks have been ongoing throughout the weeks. We haven't been reporting on those as heavily because they've kind of gotten repetitive at this point, but they still are taking place, and all these different Russian ships trying to export the grain and transport it wherever they're trying to take it are getting hit left and right. And also, empty ships are also getting hit too. Pretty much any ship out there is fair game at this point for the Ukrainians, and now we're seeing that even the grain ports at Novorossiysk, the port itself, is now getting hit. So I would say it's looking pretty ugly, but let's see what the audience is thinking about it. And it looks like 55% said Russia will not survive the winter, while 26% said it's merely a temporary setback, and 9% said it really won't have much effect at all with these attacks we're currently seeing. And I would say that this is going to be a pretty severe setback, because Russia is about to go into the winter, and clearly Ukraine is hitting gas facilities or hitting grain facilities. They're basically hitting anything and everything they can at this point, pretty much taking off all limitations about what they can hit to make the winter absolutely unbearable for the Russian Federation. And unfortunately, Russia is doing the same thing back to Ukraine too. They're also hitting the exact same targets inside of Ukraine, and that's nothing new for the Putin regime. They've been doing that for ages. So I would say the winter is going to be extremely difficult. Now, to say they won't survive the winter, that might be a little bit too dramatic in my opinion, but it's certainly going to be testing the Russians to the extreme, I would say a lot. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 54%. It sounds quite dramatic. They won't survive. They will make it through, but I don't think all of them are going to be making it through. If you all get the drift, I think it's gonna be incredibly difficult for the Russians to be able to float through the winter. Heating costs are going to be insanely high. Food costs are going to be insanely high, and also transportation costs are going to be insanely high. So basically, everything in Russia is going to be grinding economically to a complete halt. It's basically going to be the end game for a country economically, in almost every single aspect imaginable. And even then, they have to still try and keep the Russian military running in the middle of the winter, which is a humongous resource drain in its own right. So I would say they're going to have a pretty tough time. Now, I see a lot of people saying some things in the chat, and I actually want to kind of clear up the situation with Russia, because some people are saying Russia didn't have grain before they invaded Ukraine. I hate to tell y'all folks, but the Russians are actually a major global producer of grain before the war, before they took any Ukrainian territory. This is actually a map of all of the grain production in the world per kilograms per hectare, or which is a certain kind of measurement. I forgot how big a hectare is compared to an acre. I think it's just a couple of acres put together or something along those lines. But this is the production of wheat globally around the world, and from what I understand, this includes rice as well, and other food grains that are consumed. And if you look at Russia, there is a significant amount of grain production that is conducted in the Krasnodar area, the Novorossiysk area, and the Rostov region, really around the Don area. The Ukrainians have major wheat production that is seen throughout the southern part of Ukraine and generally throughout most of the country. And so while the Russian Federation did invade Ukraine and they are stealing grain, all of the grain that Russia is exporting isn't being stolen out of Ukraine. A lot of the grain is actually Russian grain that is also being grown and produced in Russia, and that's also why we've been talking about the harvest situation in the country as well, is because generally not only are they a significant producer and self-sufficient as far as food production is concerned, they're also a major exporter of grains even in peacetime before the war started. So with that all in the picture, also another thing, folks, like with all that in the picture being said, to actually transition that properly, thinking about it, folks, the Russian grain companies and the farming companies and industries are finding it quite difficult to be able to keep their economy, or more so industry in that end, running because of the high fuel costs. If they can't continue to subsidize at least some of their operations by exporting grain at a higher cost internationally, a lot of those companies may not even be able to afford continuing their harvests in Russia, and they may end up just completely folding and stopping entirely any kind of operations at all, meaning there is no further harvest throughout the rest of this year if it got incredibly bad for
Oh
them.
yeah. Yeah, it's really wild. Honestly, I would not be surprised to see some sort of famine hit Russia in the immediate future, because they don't have the fuel, like you're mentioning. They can't run the combine harvesters to actually harvest the grain out of the fields or any other crops for that matter. So that's been an ongoing problem for at least a month. And now we're seeing the ports get attacked. They can't export it either, and the ships are getting attacked too. So pretty much the entire chain of selling the grain, exporting it, or even producing the grain is being attacked at every single level. So I mean, a country like Russia, I would imagine their food supply is a little bit on the fragile side, I would imagine, if I had to take a guess. So when you have something like this, persist over the course of several weeks and if not months, then I would say famine is probably becoming a lot more likely, at least in my opinion.
It might actually do that. I would have to say it definitely could. I just don't know what kind of food they have in storage, because I don't know if they have a food system like we have here in America, where some of the like food items that we eat have actually been put into storage for like over a year, and then it's finally circulated out into the public for them to consume. I'm not sure if they have something like that in Russia, because that might save it off, but the prices would also start to rise higher and higher because they would be factoring in the supply that's left with the demand that would still be at a constant rate, and so the food prices would continue to increase. Also, by the way, it's wildly fascinating to look at this, folks. These are rabbit holes that I don't really go into a lot myself off air, but it's quite odd to look at this and just see the little bit of the world that's actually used to produce most of the grain. And grain is what most people subsist off of day to day, even in the modern diet. It is mostly grain based because grain is the cheapest thing. And when you look at the world over, Matthew, I mean, like, there's some in China, like just south of Beijing and north of Shanghai. There's some massive amount of grain production there, and in northern India, and in Western Europe, and in Russia, and in the United States. And then there's practically no grain production anywhere else in the rest of the world for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting how food, like most crops, are like done in very small areas. Like you would think the entire world was full of farms, but it's really not that way. Which is interesting. It's just like with how many people we have in the world, what's it like 8 billion people or something? You start to get an idea of why famines are like in some places a common occurrence. Like for example, the continent of Africa, they have constant famine in various different regions. So it's just really tricky. Like when you really think about the fragility of the global food supply chain, it honestly is kind of horrifying if you really think about it.
Yeah, it really is something else, honestly. And when you look at this kind of stuff, it's like, dang, it's like basically nobody produces grain. And also, folks, that's why in Africa they have wild famines that just rip through countries and kill millions of people. Is because they have no staple, no staple diet to work off of as far as a food supply goes. All of it has to be imported for the most part, and they have no like basically, folks, they have no grain to lean back on to just eat off of in a country in Africa, in any country in Africa, if for some reason food stability is disrupted. So if food stability is disrupted to most of Africa, regardless of the country, usually major famines can ensue that will kill millions of people, which is not what you'd see in a country like the United States or anywhere else like China, for example, because they actually have food production and a staple grain to be able to feed off of, and that means they, aren't relying on, say, a ship showing up in their country every single Saturday with the right amount of grain to be able to keep everyone on the starving diet, which is kind of an interesting thing. But anyways, moving us on out of that rabbit hole, which I'm not gonna lie, folks, that graph and that map got me wildly fascinated. I wanted to keep that rabbit hole going longer, but we have a lot of news to go. And so we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, as we were also able to see that tonight the port of Sevastopol came under a Ukrainian drone attack, and we were able to see heavy gunfire in the area of the port. Let us take a gander. That's quite heavy
Oh
gunfire.
wow, it looks literally like Novorossiysk. This is in Crimea.
Man, Crimea River. Ah, man, we made that joke for 4.5 years, and it never gets old. Here's another clip of the air defense in Sevastopol. Man, this gives off that World War II air defense of Berlin kind of vibe.
Honestly. It's constant too.
Endless, unbelievable stuff. We don't know if anything's been hit yet in Sevastopol, folks, and we're probably going to be getting a damage assessment by tomorrow if anything has actually been hit and damaged. But moving us on out of all of this down here along the Russian coast and the occupied Crimean coastline, it's now time for us, folks, to pack on up and move on over and into the Middle East. Because we have some pretty big news that's come out of the Middle East today as far as threats have been concerned from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we've also been able to get some further developments and statements from the U.S. government that haven't really amounted to much. But before we get to that, though, we do have one more poll to get to before we get to the middle of the East, as Putin has warned. Also, I do need to get to that one before we move on. One more thing to get to before we get to the Middle East. The Russian government has warned today, or at least the European Union, that Russia could seize European vessels in response to the European Union's plans to sell cargo confiscated from Russian Shadow Fleet ships. So now the Russians are saying that if this process continues, the Russians will try and do the very same thing in return to the European Union, which would be piracy, quite literally. It doesn't even have a sanction framework working off of it. It's quite literally the definition of privateering, which is piracy at a state sanction level. And so a lot of people are talking about whether or not Putin is really going to follow through with such an insane and crazy notion as conducting piracy on the high seas, which in a national sense is privateering. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now Putin's saying that he wants to try to seize these European ships, or at least that's the claim. That's the allegation out there that apparently he's getting so angry about the shadow fleet that Russia has being intercepted by NATO that he wants to reciprocate at this point. So, what are your thoughts about that? 42% said Putin really doesn't have that ability. It's really a bunch of hot air to even threaten something like that because he can't pull it off. 28% said Putin will not go that far and he's simply bluffing. And 23% said Putin will start seizing ships very, very soon. And I really don't believe that Russia has that capability. Maybe if they launched like helicopters from Kaliningrad or something and sent them out into the sea, maybe they could try to see some vessels, maybe. But they really don't have that ability. For example, when the UK decides to see something, they simply send the warships off their coast. They send out some helicopters and they seize these Shadow Fleet vessels from Russia. But Russia really doesn't have that proximity to pull that off. So I just don't think that's really possible. I think that it sounds like a bunch of frustration from Putin, in my personal opinion, but nothing he can really act on. At least right now he can't, unless he starts using Kaliningrad as a hopping off point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say he really doesn't have the ability, because even if they tried to use the Baltisk flotilla at Kaliningrad to try and get some ships, they're only going to be getting those that are going to Finland, Sweden, or the Baltic states. Everyone else has already had their ships go up to a port in Britain, Germany, France, Norway, or Sweden. So if they wanted to intercept folks and actually seize ships en masse, they would have to sail the Russian Navy from the Baltic Fleet, either all the way out of the Baltic Sea and into the Atlantic to start conducting that action, or they'd have to take the Arctic Fleet out of Murmansk and sail it all the way around to the shipping routes that are in the Atlantic to try and actually pull something off like this. They're not near to any major shipping lane to speak of. Not even on their east coast are they near to a major shipping lane. They're in Vladivostok on the eastern coast. Do y'all know where the biggest shipping lanes are? From there, several hundred miles away going to South Korea and Japan, and those aren't even EU countries. All of those ships are going to ports of call in East Asia. So even if they wanted to go with the easiest and most viable option from how far away it is from a port, none of those ports and none of those nations are even involved in being a threatening position to the Russian nation. So I don't even see how the hell they could pull it off. Also, by the way, let me show you this really quick. Let me show you this. How far is it from Murmansk, skirting around people's territorial waters to get into the North Atlantic if they went in a straight line? And the answer is about 2,000 miles. So by the time that most Russian frigates would have made it into the North Atlantic, they will have largely burned about through a third of their fuel, and they will also have to use a third of their fuel to get back to the port of Murmansk, which means that they will have a very limited period of being out there for about a week and a half each to be able to try and grab a ship, nab it, and then bring it back to Russia somehow. And even still, they would, if they tried to bring it back to Russia in the quickest way, they'd have to probably bring it back to St. Petersburg, meaning they'd have to pass by British waters, Danish waters, German waters, Polish waters, Swedish waters, the Baltic states' waters, and Finland's waters, where there could be a confrontation in every single one of them, if not all of them, to be able to try and get a ship back to a port to be able to actually liquidate it. And where would they liquidate it? They're under heavy sanctions as well, folks. It's like, where in the world would they even liquidate a ship like that? They're going to sell it to who? Or sell the cargo to who? They can't because of the sanctions. So I think the threat is honestly a whole bunch of hot air. But we actually have breaking news coming out right now from the Crimean Peninsula. So Matthew, what do we got there?
Okay, so things just took a really bad turn for the worst right now for the Russians in Crimea. It looks like Ukraine was just able to hit apparently a major power station in Balaclava inside of Crimea, and we're currently got a video of that. It looks like it is burning indeed, and now we're hearing that there's apparently a total blackout in Sevastopol right now, and there's no timeline on when the power is going to get turned back on. So we are expecting that this could become a much wider problem, because I'm not sure if they really are having the continual ability to fix the power grid when it gets hit like this. Once again, Crimea is largely cut off from outside contact or outside truck shipments to be able to get replacement parts. So this could be pretty bad. But let's take a look at the 8-second clip here. It just shows it burning basically the power station here in Balaclava. It should show us something.
It is showing us something.
It shows us a fire.
Oh.
It's real hot.
Well, the power's out. Like that, we know that. The power is out, folks. If y'all were looking for electricity in Sevastopol, tough breaks, folks. Tough breaks. You ain't getting none. So we know that, at least at a minimum. So, with that breaking news out of the way, goodbye to the electrical grid once again in Crimea. It's now time for us, folks, to finally move on, everything considered, down into the Middle East. We've got news, folks. We've got news out of the Middle East. But before we get on down to the Middle East, I do have to say, folks, a humongous and tremendous thanks to everybody who has been watching so far tonight. YouTube's still doing their little tricks. Oh, their little tricksy poo. We had 16.1 thousand people here at the peak. That number is not accurate, folks. It's definitely a good bit higher than that. 17,000 or so. It did it again last night. So It's somewhere around 17,000. So we think of about all 17,000 of y'all who have been here so far tonight, because we are always entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that y'all enjoy the news here from the Enforcer channel. We always try our best to be able to make sure that the news is presented in the most accurate way possible, and that we continue to take a pro-Western and pro-American mindset in the coverage to our news, but also making sure to be as factual about it as possible. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I hope that y'all been enjoying that so far tonight. We're about to be moving on down to the Middle East, folks. The Middle East is a land of great frustration, sadness, and despair. But do not worry, folks. We will find some way to make a joke out of it. I be damned if we do not. So before we move on into that, I do want to take a quick, brief moment to get 3 questions from the chat before we move on down there. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So getting into our first 3 super chats, and also, by the way, before we get into those 3 super chats, just another piece of news, by the way. Apparently, not only is the power out completely in Sevastopol, but now we're seeing that according to net blocks and the data from the region, it looks like there's a complete and total loss of internet in Sevastopol, of course, Russian-occupied Crimea, following those drone attacks. So that's one of the first total internet blackouts we've seen so far, so that's quite significant. And also, we are getting some breaking news, apparently, that in Yemen right now, it looks like some very heavy clashes just broke out apparently between the Saudi-backed forces and the Houthis in southern Yemen. So that's a pretty big firefight happening right there right now. We have seen those break out before, but this appears to be a pretty large one that we're seeing right now. But we'll save that for just a minute. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our first super chat here, which goes to none other than Sinister Hugs. And thank you very much, Sinister, for that $20 support and helping to keep the channel running. And we do appreciate that support very, very much. And they said LSA forever.
LSA forever indeed. And thanks to incredible folks like you, the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. This channel has run for 1,631 days, almost non-stop, covering the news, and it has been entirely crowdfunded for all 1,631 of those days. And that, I have to say, folks, is an incredible thing, because it helps us to be able to keep the news running. And it helps us to be able to say what y'all want to hear us say, which is what we want to say, instead of having to really kind of say things to make sure that we are viable for supporters, financial backers in the background to sponsor us or something along those lines. And we are greatly appreciative of that. Every single one of y'all who's gone out of your way, because nobody has to, but yet people do, to support this channel and help it to keep on running, has made it possible for us to cover the news the way we have done it for 1,631 days. And I gotta thank you greatly for being a part of that, Sinister Hugs, because you help us to be able to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die, and to continue to keep true to the Lee Spring Army's original vision and founding values. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, that power outage, by the way, in Sevastopol, I just finally got a map here showing how widespread it is. Literally, the entire city of Sevastopol, which, by the way, is the largest city inside of Russian-occupied Crimea, by the way, it is totally out of power. And I just reposted that right now. It's a map showing the outages that we're currently looking at here. This might be the most widespread infrastructure attack that we've seen so far by Ukraine inside of Russian-occupied Crimea, between the internet completely going out and also the power completely going out in Sevastopol right now. So that's pretty significant. It looks like the Russians are panicking from the looks of it.
Man, would you look at that? The city is without power, boy. Man, what the terrible shame, boy. A whole city. I wonder what Simferopol is doing right now. You know, that's the second biggest city in the country. I wonder what they're doing right now. I
wonder. They don't really say. They don't really say what's happening there. They don't say there's an outage.
I would bet there probably is, because, I mean, the Balaclava thermal power plant is basically the power plant for the whole peninsula. So it's like, if Sevastopol's out, Simferopol's got to be out, because the Balaclava power plant is in Simferopol. So maybe we'll get a report from there soon. I think, folks, we might be seeing a whole peninsula-wide power outage. It's just that Sevastopol is the easiest place to get a report out of right now immediately, because it's a major populated area, so it's going to be causing a stir. But I have a feeling that probably within the next hour, we're going to get some sort of report out that maybe the entire peninsula is completely without power. Most of it already has been. It's been going through rolling blackouts for months that last over most of the day. So this may have just been knocking out what little was left inside of Simferopol and Sevastopol at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that news quite well. Quite crazy to see. And also, a humongous thanks to you so much once again, Sinister Hugs, for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to none other than Old Warrior Fella, another channel legend. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that $50 support
Hey!
right there. The largest support of the night, by the way. And we do appreciate that, as always. It is that support that keeps this channel on the air for 4+ years. And once again, a huge shout out to all of our super chatters, including Old Warrior Fella, for that generosity. He said, I read today that Ukraine took out an S-400 at Vladimiron's Black Sea bathhouse, and I thought the Black Sea home was destroyed. That's actually a different one, by the way. You talking about the palace right outside of, what's the city called, by the way? It's like right outside of, I
Oh,
forgot the name of it.
Sochi, Tuops, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's in between there. There's a smaller town that's actually closer to, I can't remember the name right off the top of my head, but it's one of Putin's biggest palaces there. That one still exists. It has not been torn down, and an S-400 was destroyed around that area, and also some electronic warfare systems were destroyed around that house. We covered that last night too. So that's pretty big deal. It's still standing though, but I don't know if maybe the Ukrainians plan on hitting it directly. It could be that they plan on that.
It could be. From what we know last night, they generally hit the air defense systems that were based out of the small Russian Coast Guard facility at Galinchik, and destroyed an S-400, and the day before that, they destroyed an electronic warfare system. So that's generally the losses that we know of around Galinchik, which is around what looks kind of like a mini Versailles, basically, or at least that house is supposed to be somewhere around there. But the smaller one that had been demolished, that one, I believe, was within Tuops and Sochi, or Sochi, whichever way you prefer to call it. But it's somewhere in between there. That was the one that was demolished, and then there's another one kind of closer to Galenchik that is still standing, and it's a lot more opulent looking and impressive. So apparently they don't want to demolish that one yet, probably for that reason. A little bit wild, though, when you think about it, though, Old Warrior Fella. Putin basically lives like a Roman emperor, or in like a czar, basically. He has all of these different little palaces that he's built throughout Russia, and he just goes and hangs out in them whenever he wants to. That's literally just what the czars did. It's like, and then people in Russia want to go, Putin, before the war, Putin, he's a real man, the man of the people, a champion. It's like, if he's a champion of the people, why does he have 30 different palaces that he, moves around between throughout the whole of Russia? It's like, that doesn't really sound like a champion of the people to me. It sounds like a grifter, honestly. It sounds like someone's getting ripped off, and it is,
Oh yeah,
it is the Russian people.
he's the people of the man.
Man, bro, he is not the man of the people. He's a grifter of the people. Man, like he goes around going, I am your champion, I am your savior, while he just rakes up all of the tax money and uses it for himself.
Oh yeah, and the fact that he wins elections by such huge margins too, like what is it, 90%, 99% or something like that. I mean, he's obviously extremely popular.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, he's loved by everyone. I mean, who in the world could say otherwise? It's really crazy, folks. It's kind of like people who get elected in some countries and they claim that they're all for the people, and then they gain a couple of extra $1 billion in net worth while they're in the office of a public official. Kind of a little interesting like that. It's a very fascinating thing when people do that, because it's even more interesting from the social side of it, because so many people will continue to defend folks like that, like in Russia and elsewhere around the world, while they're clearly getting ripped off somehow, and someone's using the office to enrich themselves and themselves alone at the detriment of the nation. Just a fascinating sort of a thing. Not that that's paralleling anything else outside of Russia, just a fascinating sort of a thought. But beyond that, though, huge thanks to you once again for the support, Old Warrior Fella, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to get on into the last question of this segment. And then we're going to be getting on to the rest of the news, starting in the Middle East and moving around the rest of the world. So what do we got, Matthew?
This one goes to Jenny the Pooh, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Jenny, for that 20 once again tonight. We do appreciate it very much once again. And they did not leave a comment, though. I did not see a comment attached. It was simply just pure support, and we do appreciate it very much. Of course, Wazab Beijing. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a huge thanks to your support, Jenny the Pooh, and helping this channel to keep on running. And we got to thank you greatly. While you didn't throw in a comment, the support is incredible, and it helps us to be able to keep this channel running day in and day out. And we're always greatly appreciative of everyone who goes out of their way to support the channel, because nobody has to. The channel is entirely free to play. You can be here and not even have to spend a second of your time watching an ad to try and get on this live stream. And so we're greatly appreciative of the folks who do go out of their way to support it, because y'all are quite literally the bread and butter that helps us to be able to keep the lights on and keep the computers running, so that we've been running this thing every single day. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, it is now time for us folks to move on and into the middle of the East. And folks, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because when you think about it, it's like, isn't the East on most maps to your right? Like, how in the world is it the middle of the East? It's like, it's not really the middle, is it? It's more like the left. Maybe we ought to call this like the left of the east or something, the east of the left or something, because that seems to me to make the most sense. But anyways, moving us on from that whole aside, it appears that the Islamic Republic of Iran is still hardlining as of today. The Iranians did make a couple of statements over the day, starting off strong this morning by announcing that they have not been in talks with the United States for a 60-day ceasefire extension. This came after Pakistan suggested that the memorandum of understanding could just be modified and it could be extended as far as the time period that was supposed to be conducted, and the Iranians said that they were not even getting involved in those sorts of talks, and it was completely pointless. We also were able to hear that a senior Iranian source rejected reports that Tehran and the United States had agreed to extend a 60-day window under their June interim deal, telling Reuters there had been absolutely no progress on reviving the agreement or setting a timeline for U.S. commitments. The source said mediators are still discussing a possible U.S. return to the June framework, which is the memorandum of understanding, but argued that from Tehran's perspective, the 60-day period never formally began because Washington violated the agreement shortly after it was reached. So now the Iranians are saying that the memorandum of understanding never even happened, and they wanted to possibly happen, but the U.S. is going to have to agree to that and that alone, and that is the only thing that's going to satisfy them. While that was all going on, the Iranians did fire a couple of more anti-ship missiles into the Strait of Hormuz, as explosions were announced near to the area of Sarik and Bandar-e-Jask from eyewitness accounts, once again showing that more anti-ship missile activity had been conducted over the night and that more missiles had been fired into the area of the strait, most likely attempting to dissuade or conduct attacks on commercial ships that had gotten too close or may have been looking to attempt a passage of the strait. While all this is going on, the United States has said quite a many things today. And so, folks, let's look at what was said yesterday and compare it to what was said today. Yesterday, it was said that the Strait of Hormuz is ours. It is under our control, and ships can pass through it quite easily. The day before that, we were able to hear that the strait would eventually open. And then we were able to hear before that there were going to be no tolls, and the strait was going to be opened by Iran because they were still in control of it. And then the day before that, they said that they would lift the blockade once the Iranians agreed to the deal, meaning the strait was completely closed. And then on Sunday, they said that the strait, well, actually not Sunday, this would be Thursday of last week, they said that the strait is open anyways and it doesn't even matter. Now today, we've been able to hear that the strait is under Iranian control once again. A major shocker for many people, as the president did just say yesterday that we basically ran the thing. And we were able to hear today that the president has stated the following. The USA has total control over the Strait of Hormuz. I think we'll keep it. Our naval blockade is being called by everyone a wall of steel. I don't know who everyone is because I haven't heard anyone say that. And there is nothing Iran can do about it. They have no navy. They have no air force. Their remaining soldiers are unpaid. The IRGC is decimated and fleeing, outside the ones that fired the anti-ship missiles, apparently. And their leadership is uncertain at best. They have no money. Their country is shot. All they have is fake news and 300% inflation. And getting worse. Iran is all talk and no action. The bully of the Middle East is no longer. Praise be to Yallah, President of the United States.
Man, what's up? What is up with the praise be to Allah thing at the very end of these things? Like, what the hell is up with that?
I don't even know, man. I've completely given up at making any sense of this stuff at all. But now, folks, we've gone from the Iranians are in control of it to they're not in control of it, to they are in control of it, and we're trying to get it open, to now we've circled all the way back around, folks, to what was said quite literally a week ago, is that the strait is open and we control the thing completely. We've literally done, like, that is crazy, Matthew. Literally 7 days ago, exactly to the day, a week ago, this same statement was basically made a week ago. And we went through this whole, like, five stages of grief deal over the last 7 days, and now we've made it back to square one that we have control of it again magically.
Yeah, it's like such a hot and cold routine. You know, it's like bipolar. It's insane the way this flip flops back and forth between the two different things. It's definitely concerning to say the least.
It is quite concerning. That is an understatement. We were also able to hear, folks, that the Treasury Secretary, who I can only describe at this point as an absolute genius, according to what has been said about his suggestion today, told the president that tightening sanctions could make Iran buckle, and claimed the Strait of Hormuz will become irrelevant in 2 years, as 70% of its energy traffic will move to underground pipelines anyways. It's just the problem is that we don't really know what's going to happen in between now and those next 2 years, because we don't really have a way to get the oil out of the Middle East right now, apparently until 2 years later, according to the Treasury Secretary. So, we have absolute geniuses, folks, running the U.S. government, because it's like, that's great that there's going to be pipelines in 2 years, but what about the oil and the gas that we're trying to use to get to work and everything else today, right now, and also next week? It's like, what about that oil and gas? How about all of that stuff? Because 2 years is great, but 2 years is way too far away. We're trying to talk about fixing this in the here and the now. And also, this came up with a cherry on top, folks. That not only was this the statement apparently from the Treasury Secretary in his recommendation to the president is now shifting to a do-nothing strategy on Iran, betting that economic sanctions and a naval blockade will force Tehran to negotiate after military threats and limited strikes failed to end the war, according to The Atlantic. If we're doing a do-nothing strategy to make the Iranians fold, why didn't we just start with that instead of going into a whole war at this point? You know, like, I don't mean to sound like a snark ass the whole time I'm covering this stuff, folks, but this all just seems absolutely stupid to me. So now the president's move is basically what we were doing before the war started, and the U.S. government had been doing for about 20 years straight, really even 40 years straight, which is just to put heavy sanctions on them and try and limit their economic activity to see if that will force them to make some sort of concessions or topple the Islamic regime. It's like, well, what was the whole point of the war then, if we're basically just going back to the strategy we've had quite literally since Reagan?
Yeah, I don't even know, man, at this point. I don't think they know either. I think they're confused as hell. Basically, they expect Iran to fold. They expect Iran to just give in and simply give up. But that's obviously not going to happen. So it's like, if military attacks doesn't make this regime come to its knees, because, I mean, it's the U.S. military attacking. We've got, like, missile firepower, like, of the most extreme variety. If that doesn't make them rethink things, then what makes them think sitting back and just hoping that something changes is going to fix it?
I don't even know. Like, I have absolutely no clue. It's like, and man, like, what is stupid, man, is like, oh, so and so, the last president, he's so weak. He sat there and did nothing to Iran. He just tried to make them fold with sanctions. Now, apparently, that's their move as well. It's like, well, it's like, if this is now their strategy of just basically lying every day about what's really going on and just doing absolutely nothing until something changes, it's like, isn't that what everyone's done for the last 40 something years? That this guy said was stupid and completely pointless because it didn't do anything, and it didn't, because they were still around 47 years later. It's like, what are basically, folks, to describe this, I'm not even going to ask what is the point of this. Basically, the whole point of this is that the president's gotten bored with it, or he's just been told that it isn't really feasible anymore because we basically kind of thrown away all our cards on absolutely goofy strategies that were never going to work. And so now the president's just going to try and ignore it and move on and hope that this doesn't end up imploding something at some point in the future, and basically just let the Iranians control the Strait de facto without an actual deal being made. So that looks to be what they're kind of working off of right now. So that's the U.S. position, folks. We have gone from the last week, the Strait is under our control and we run it, to every other statement that could be made in between the Iranians completely control it and we're going to have to take it from them, to we completely control it and everything else. And now we've gotten back to that again 7 days later, and now we're hearing reports from U.S. officials speaking to the press that now the U.S. has just decided today and has woken up and decided they're just going to do absolutely nothing and just figure out, let's just see what this mess turns into over time. So quite the strategy, folks. Sounds like quite the geniuses in charge at this point as far as the overarching strategy here. And I'll be honest with y'all, folks, I was in support of the war at the beginning because the concept was to overthrow the Islamic regime and to also not let something as simple as the Iranians blockading the Strait of Hormuz happen. But looking at this now, 6.5 months later, and now hearing the statements coming out that their strategy is to do nothing, it's like, well, why the hell did we even fight the war in the first place? Couldn't they have just done nothing from the start? And we wouldn't even have to have the Strait of Hormuz as an issue because they would have never blockaded it at that point. And they still would be making a nuclear weapon and the Islamic regime would still be intact. It's like just to make it clear to y'all, folks, we have achieved absolutely no war goals 6.5 months in. We're not even close to achieving a war goal. And the Strait of Hormuz is now blockaded, and the Iranians are able to control 23% of the world's oil with an iron fist through the strait. And now our strategy now is to do nothing after we've done enough to get completely screwed over. It's like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, there was really no point. I would say, well, I'll be curious to see how it goes from here because it seems like this idea of like stalling and not really doing anything, that's not going to work long term. So I have a feeling we'll be back to fighting soon. So I would imagine it's simply a small pause of a waiting period. As y'all might remember the MOU, they said, oh, the MOU is going to end it all. And then we went right back to fighting after that. So I have a feeling a brawl is around the corner.
I have a feeling it probably will be. While that brawl is coming around the corner, which the Iranians are apparently believing definitely is going to be happening, they have made a very serious threat today. And so, this is their threat. Iran is warned it's preparing for military operations on U.S. soil following a quote unquote new military doctrine tasking the IRGC to attack enemy in its soil. Adding Iran will take operations into enemy territory, into the enemy's land, and carry on operations far from our own territory, IRGC Senior Advisor General Mohammad Reza Nakhdi said. Whenever the conditions are favorable and the order is issued, we must be able to take the operation into enemy territory. What this is, folks, because a lot of people, like someone down here was like, oh, try invading America. It's not an invasion of America. It's basically terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. The IRGC operates as a asymmetrical terrorist force in its actual military operations. The conventional force of Iran is the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which includes an actual army, a navy, an air force, and so on. The IRGC is what it basically in Iran is the equivalent of the Waffen SS in Germany during the Second World War, or the NKVD in the Soviet Union, which is a military force that is entirely outside the military structure and answers directly to the supreme leader of the country rather than anyone else in any sort of a military command structure. So the IRGC is basically threatening in the statement that they will start to conduct terrorist attacks en masse on U.S. soil if the United States tries to strike them again, and if the opportunity presents itself to the Iranians. This is something, by the way, folks, that is a little bit concerning because there is a little bit known that there were some people that have been alleged to have crossed the border in the prior years and even recently into the United States of America that may be associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and may be attempting to create those sorts of cells within the United States of America. And so, with that in mind, Matthew, what are people thinking about this threat? Are they thinking that it's a very serious one, a minor one, and what are you thinking as well?
Okay, so Iran says it is preparing for attacks on U.S. soil if the war restarts in the Middle East. And we have seen that cyber attacks have already been taking place from the Iranian regime. They've been cyber attacking inside of different cities in the United States and hitting their water infrastructure. So that's been happening. But do you think they'll really go as far as to launch a real attack on U.S. soil, like a terror attack? And what are your thoughts about that? 51% said this is a very serious threat to take extremely seriously, while 29% said I'm not at all worried about this, and 12% said U.S. agencies have it fully under control. And I would say that unfortunately, I think this is a very serious threat, not just because of the people that cross the border that might be IRGC agents and could be, possibly terrorists, but also there's a huge, huge risk of people inside the United States that are U.S. citizens being radicalized by IRGC members online and are being convinced to do stuff that's heinous against the public. That's probably the bigger threat because those people are a lot harder to identify before they do something. It's a lot easier to identify an IRGC agent and keep tabs on them and surveil them. That's not too hard, but it's really hard to identify people that are just normal everyday people that get radicalized through DMs and social media by these lunatics inside of Iran. And then these Iranians tell them to go do something heinous and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll go do that. And then they go do it. That's really tough. And that's where the real threat, in my opinion, comes from. It's that lone wolf threat that they always talk about. And I would say that's a huge risk. So I'm with the 52%. I think it's a very serious threat. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if we have a full grip on that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it is a quite serious threat. The best indication that we have, or the best example that we would have that this is a serious threat, is the ISIS attacks that were conducted on U.S. soil in the middle of the 2010s. Many of y'all will probably remember things such as the San Bernardino attack and others that were inspired by were conducted by people who had been radicalized online and inspired to conduct these heinous acts in the name of the Islamic State here in the United States of America. And that definitely can happen in the modern day. We do know that there are significant significant amounts of groups online, including the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese, and other generally enemies of the state that do try and radicalize people online, and then try and see that they conduct some sort of acts or sabotage within the United States of America to sow seeds of fear, and also see through that fear that they would hope that they are able to further their objective or aims, whatever those may be. And so I would say that it is a very serious threat because the IRGC does radicalize people online. We do know that quite clearly. We've already seen that at the beginning of the war in Iran, there were 2 attacks conducted on U.S. soil, shootings for the larger part, that the people who were involved claimed that they were doing it in the name of Iran or in support of Iran. So there is definitely a threat that there could be some sort of radicalization conducted online, and that attacks could be attempted on American soil at some point. So I would say I would be definitely with the 52%. It is a serious threat, to say the least. We also were able to hear another statement that they added, or more so rumors that were added by Shen, that are circulating that petrol prices in Iran may jump from 3,000 to 87,200 tomans per liter, which would be roughly 29 times the current price. I don't really, I have to say, folks, we have to cover this just in case if it does happen, but I don't really know where that metric is coming from. Iran is a significant producer of oil. They produce more oil than they consume. And not only that, most of their refineries are still intact and operational. So it's not really like they're running into any sort of significant shortages, at least internally on their domestic market. So I don't really know how the price is supposed to be skyrocketing to this figure. That was not really explained. But if implemented, this could trigger severe public backlash and renewed unrest. And in 2019, a threefold increase sparked major protests throughout the country. Petrol is heavily subsidized in Iran and currently sold well below global market prices. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm not really getting this. It's like maybe it's government pressure that he can't subsidize it, so they're going to raise the price. But if they already know that the threefold price led to riots in 2019, why in the world would they conduct something along the lines of a 15-fold increase, knowing what kind of instability that could create? I'm not entirely sure why they do that, and there wasn't really a great deal of explanation as to why that might be conducted, but we're covering it just in case if it does happen. Moving us on out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we've also been able to hear that apparently some sailors on the USS Abraham Lincoln were not at all happy with their time in the service, and apparently a couple of them tried to jump overboard amid the deployment and the actions that were conducted during the first and second phase of the conflict.
They try to jump over, like, what do they mean, like desert? Like they try to like swim off and just like escape? Like what are they talking about?
Let me show you. Let me show you. So let me go get a picture here. Do you see the Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah, yeah.
So they go out, right? They go out to like top deck. They go look overside. They go, man, that'd be big fall. And then they go, woo, psh, right into the water, and then they try and swim away. And then they have to put a little away boat off the aircraft carrier, and they have to go grab them and drag them back on board. And then they probably get tried for desertion. That sort of stuff. It's a whole deal, but
That's
apparently
nuts.
a couple of them did it.
That's really nuts right there. And also, by the way, I'm not sure, is jumping from a height like that survivable, really? It's like, is it really survivable? I mean, that's a pretty high deck.
Oh yeah, it's survival. I think the deck to the water is only 70 feet. So as long as you don't like belly flop onto it, you'll be able to survive. I think it's like 150 feet up or so. That's when it becomes fatal. Even if you're trying to not belly flop, it would become fatal at that point.
Yeah, honestly, with this piece of news here, we had heard those reports of the laundry room fire and stuff on these other Navy vessels. It sounds to me like morale is extremely low. Like it sounds like the morale is not doing good at all. Because I'm sure that people try to desert all the time. I'm sure that's something that's not completely unheard of. But if it's becoming frequent enough for them to be reporting on it, and now it's becoming a story, that's a little bit of a different situation. So it's like, what is causing the sailors to do that? It's like, is the treatment that bad that they would rather try to jump off the side of the ship and swim away? I mean, you got to be pretty desperate to do something like that.
Well, there's actually been a lot of reports from the sailors after they got back. They've told their family members what it was like on board, and they described the conditions as absolutely abject, if not terrible. Some of them said that after about a month in action, the ship's food that was served in the mess was getting down to quite literally 2 tortillas and a half cup of rice, and that was a whole meal, and they would have that meal 3 times a day. Toilets were clogged, most systems started to stop operating, the ship smelled of shit, basically through most of it, because the sewage system stopped working, and they were running into all of these different problems including the fact that there was absolutely nothing to keep up morale. And they basically the aircraft carrier folks was completely cut off from any logistics and just had to operate with what it had. Apparently no tender came up to even resupply it at any point during the entirety of the duration of their engagement against the Iranians. And so at a point, they're basically living on a ship like in the 18th century. They're eating hardtack and maybe some beans, and they're sitting around with absolutely nothing to do in the meantime or anything to keep their spirits up. They're not able to call home. They're not able to communicate with anyone from the outside world. They're stuck in a ship that's painted seafoam green on the inside. Well, I think the subs are painted seafoam green. I think the aircraft carriers actually just have like that gray paint on the inside of them for the most part. So you're just wandering through these endless bulkheads, sleeping in your bunk if you even had one. And the Gerald Ford 500 of them got burned out in the from a laundry berthing fire or something along those lines. Overall, it was quite a horrific experience. And I remember folks saying that when we were watching. I was like, aren't these carriers out for a while? Like, don't they have like tenders going out to them? Shouldn't they be bringing them back and replacing them with carriers that are getting ready for deployment? I was like, this seems kind of a little bit draconian for the sailors on board. And it seems like it definitely was from what we're hearing now.
Yeah, I would say like that the United States really needs to understand that just because the military is the military, like obviously you're not going in there for like a pleasure cruise, like it's not that. But we also can't make it so bare bones and so unbearable that people are willing to jump off the side of the ship. It's like, well, you know, we're a very wealthy country in the planet, or at least we're supposed to be a very wealthy country in the planet. So it seems like we should have better conditions for the military where people aren't wanting to do stuff like that. Because I mean, whatever the reason was, like even if it was just like a handful of people, it's like the fact that even a handful of people in the military wanted to jump off the side of the ship and swim away. I mean, that's a bad look, and it's like it shouldn't be like that. It's like, well, why are we letting the sailors live through situations like that and also just have to endure it? It's like, why not improve their conditions? We have the money.
Why the hell are we treating them like it's the Royal Navy in the height of line battles in like the 1700s? Like, why are they being treated like that? Because in World War II, folks, because some people in the chat are saying, oh, those people are wimps. In World War II, they had like ice cream on board all the time. They had limitless amounts of food. It was like powdered eggs and whatnot, but they still had at least variety in the menu. If y'all don't know, folks, historically, the Navy is where the food is supposed to be the best because food is considered to be a very important part of morale because really they have absolutely nothing else when they're on deployment at sea on these ships. They look out into the sea. There's absolutely nothing out there but just water. So literally you're in the middle of a whole bunch of nothingness on some ship that is completely bare bones with absolutely nothing to do on board when you're not on your duty post on the vessel. So you're just stuck on this damn thing. It would drive people insane. And so the Navy found out even way back then that damn, these people are going to go nuts out there if we don't give them something to at least keep their spirits high. So they came up even back then in the 1910s with the Navy cookbook that had the highest quality ingredients and the best quality of food in the whole of the military to try and make sure that the morale stayed high. And from what we're hearing in this current deployment, that was not maintained on a single vessel, especially the carriers that were involved in the conflict, and they just let morale tank into the drain just to try and keep the carriers on station and operational 24/7. It's like, I get that we're trying to fight a war, but at the same time, we have to remember that there's a quality of life to be considered, because if a quality of life is not considered, folks, that affects morale. And if you have morale that's heavily affected, you could have a mutiny.
Yeah, I see some people in the chat here that apparently served in the Navy. They're saying those sailors are spoiled. I spent 9 months on an LSD, and the sailors are absolute snowflakes. But here's the catch, though. Like you may or may not be right. Like could be maybe the sailors just simply aren't like liking being on a ship. Maybe it could be something like that, or it could be something much more severe. We don't know because we haven't asked them. But the catch is, though, regardless of how you feel about it, these are the people we have serving. So they're the sailors. They're the ones fighting. They're going to be the ones involved in the war. So if they need a little bit better conditions to be able to function properly, you have to provide that. Like you can't just say they're snowflakes and let's go into the next war with people jumping off the side of the ship. I mean, you're going to have to raise the conditions a bit. I mean, if people are getting more, cushy and stuff like that, they want to have more cushy environments, and that's the people going into the military now. I mean, you got to adapt to it to a certain degree. Otherwise, nobody's going to want to join the military. Nobody's going to want to stay in it, and we have to have a military to fight.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, and also, it's like you were on an LSD, but it's like, did they actually have square meals that you were being fed that weren't literally just 2 tortillas and a half cup of rice that he doesn't even have any seasoning on it? Like, I can tell you this, folks, if I was on a carrier with absolutely nothing to do at sea, No way to entertain myself. Aircraft are roaring off the deck and slamming into the deck all day long. So it's loud as blazes on this damn thing 24/7. You've got literally nothing to do, and you're eating 2 tortillas and a half cup of rice. I probably jumped the ship as well. I mean, who the hell wouldn't? I mean, that's horrific conditions. Like that's worse than prison. I mean, like, no joke, folks. That's worse than prison. They have more to do in a prison than they would on that carrier at that point. So I would say no wonder people were jumping ship, because they probably were just getting so damn tired of the insanity of having quite literally nothing to even maintain a modicum of morale on ship. But anyways, moving us on from that, and on into the rest of our news from around the region, we were able to hear that within Iraq there was another security situation that appears to have happened at the Baghdad airport street. And so we don't really know a lot about it, but some sort of a little security incident occurred. This is in the midst of basically the military lockdown that's going on in Baghdad. We also saw that there were airstrikes conducted by the Israeli Air Force on Hadassah in southern Lebanon today. Nothing incredibly new there, but it's just the Israeli Air Force doing what they've done for a year at this point. Moving us on from that, and all the way down and into the area of Yemen, we have also been able to hear that the Yemeni Houthis have put out another threat against the Saudis, and Mohammed al-Buhaidi, the Houthi official, warned of targeting Saudi oil fields, airports, and power and water infrastructure if Riyadh launches a full-scale attack against the Houthis. So making incredibly clear they'll conduct acts of terror to try and avoid being attacked. We also were able to see as well that the Houthis started to show off FPV drones today, including this one right here, which is starting to show that they're getting into the modern drone age. I gotta say, folks, it's kind of crazy that quite literally everybody in the world, including literally dudes with AKs in the middle of Western Yemen, can get FPV drones, but somehow the U.S. military can't do that. It's like, what the hell's up with that? You know, it's like, can't they speed that up a little, get this thing off the ground? But anyways, he just talks about it, but they have FPV drones in the Houthi forces even at this point. Also, while we were on air just a moment ago, it appears that the Houthis are now conducting a major attack on Taiz in southern Lebanon, which we can actually show you on this clip right here. Well, dang. Just a firefight, that's all. But Taiz is down here. This is Taiz. So that's where the battle is currently occurring that y'all saw in that clip. But moving us on out of the Houthi lands and entirely out of the Middle East, it's now time for us folks to finally move on and back into Europe and to cover the rest of the news that we have from the war in Ukraine and also everything out of Western Europe today. NATO has finally held an emergency meeting, but it is not an Article 4 invocation. It's just an emergency North Atlantic Council today to address recent airspace violations and drone incursions in Poland and Romania. Allies laid the blame squarely on Moscow, calling the actions dangerous and unacceptable, evidence of Russia's rising risk tolerance. That's very good to hear. Generally, no one did anything beyond just saying it's concerning. So a strongly worded letter from NATO today. In the midst of that, Lithuania did announce, one of the few countries that is doing something, big kudos to them, that they are now revising their counter-mobility plan along its borders with Belarus and Russia's Kaliningrad region, and they're now expanding the defenses designed to slow or stop a potential military advance. The plan includes a 20-meter deep, 20-meter defensive strips, expandable to 150 meters in designated military areas, while the number of planned engineering equipment parks is increased from 27 to 50. Lithuania will also install road and bridge obstacles and develop areas of restored marshland intended to hinder heavily military vehicles. The deadline for several measures has been extended to 2028, with the marshland projects expected to continue through to 2030. So the Lithuanians are still trying hell or high water to defend every single part of their border, including the parts with Belarus and also the Kaliningrad region. In the midst of this, folks, the United States got an ass beating today from the Ukrainians in Germany, which is quite concerning to hear, because I want to remind you all, folks, we've had 4.5 years, 4 years, if we're counting from the very start of the drone wars in Ukraine, to be able to develop some sort of drone defensive and offensive technology or equipment. It's been 4 years. The Ukraine has it, Russia has it, Iran has it, now even the Houthis have it, which is a little ragtag terrorist force in Western Yemen. Everybody's got these things, and yet the Western world and the United States are still years behind on this and hardly have any drone warfare capabilities to speak of in the here and the now today. The U.S. got into a war game today with Ukraine in western Germany, and from what we've been able to hear, it was basically a slaughter. The Ukrainian drone units easily spotted and defeated a brigade-sized formation of American troops and armored vehicles from the 1st Cavalry Division during war games at Exercise Combined Resolve in Germany earlier this year, according to U.S. officials who spoke to the Wall Street Journal. We had some additional information on this as well. Ukrainian drone operators overwhelmed the U.S. troops during a major military exercise in Germany, and reconnaissance drones quickly located American armored vehicles before attack drones scored simulated kills, effectively wiping out the entire U.S. armored brigade. The Americans adapted during the 2-week exercise, improving concealment, dispersal, and electronic warfare tactics, and the drill highlighted Ukraine's battlefield expertise and concerns that U.S. forces remain vulnerable to small drones that are still reshaping modern warfare. Also, by the way, while they adapted,
Honestly,
we don't know how much.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think the U.S. is going to be able to adapt before a war breaks out. I think it's becoming clear at this point. The U.S. doesn't have the experts in charge or people that are knowledgeable or intelligent enough in charge right now to be able to catch up with this. Because the fact we haven't caught up with it yet, I mean, that suggests there's a lot of problems working against it right now. Number one, there's a very consolidated defense industry that largely lobbies like hell, and they're preventing progress on their own part. Then you have politicians that are generally pretty stupid. They're not very intelligent, so they don't really understand the threat. And then you have the military, which is bureaucratic as hell, and they're slow as hell to adapt to anything. So I have a feeling we'll be going into the next war probably completely unprepared, and we'll have to probably try to do it on the spot, kind of like we're doing with air defense interceptors in the Middle East right now. It'll probably be on the spot and very rushed and probably erratic, and that could put us in a bad situation in the next war, I would say. I'm not trying to be a doomer, but I don't think we have people in charge right now that are smart enough to do shit or anything, excuse me.
I would have to agree. And I see some people saying, "Oh, you're just being negative." No, we've had 4 years to do this. 4 years. Usually, the United States is the cutting edge of military technology. Usually, we're the one to innovate, and then people have to catch up. Nowadays, we're the ones having to try and catch up and innovate to countries that are third rate compared to us. I mean, if we're speaking in reality, folks, economically and militarily, the Ukrainians are a third rate nation compared to the United States of America. Yet they have the most advanced doctrine and technology on the battlefield in the present day as a third rate country, with hardly the economic or military capabilities that we have. How the hell have we not been able to do this in 4 years? Why in the world is the U.S. still treating it right now like it's some sort of a mystery? Like you got companies out here, folks, like Anduril, for example. They're like, oh yes, we finally broke the code. It's basically a DJI Mavic with a bomb strapped to it, but they cost like 30 grand. And it's like, how does that cost 30 grand? The Ukrainians are making them for like $300. And I gotta say, Anduril's like the only company that's even getting close to doing what Ukraine could be able to do. But even still, it's extremely expensive. Like the markup is insanely high on these things, or the profit margin is slamming. They're for some reason producing these things like they're Lamborghinis. And I don't even get that. It's like every single country in the world right now, folks, except for the West, is racing to drone technology. Everybody has it at this point. Even terrorist groups have it in the Middle East, like the Hezbollah forces do. If they can have them, and they can start fielding them against the IDF heavily enough that the IDF conducted a limited withdrawal from Lebanon, why the hell can the U.S. military not implement that level of drone warfare as quick and effectively as anyone else can? If a terrorist force can do it in about a year, how the hell can we not do it in 4 with a $1.2 trillion military budget at this point and 1.2 million service members and a $28 trillion GDP economically? How was that not industrially possible?
Yeah, I mean, it should be possible. I mean, there's a lot of corruption involved. There's greed involved. I mean, the U.S. right now is like inundated with greed. Like everybody and their dog wants to come along and get wealthy off of like one single drone sale or something, instead of thinking, oh, let's make it reasonable and we'll simply make a killing over like a long period of time. Everybody wants to become instantly rich, so they jack their prices up and go berserk with it. So unfortunately, Ukraine and Russia had the luxury of sort of developing drone warfare as they went, because it really wasn't a thing yet. So they both kind of had a chance to catch up to each other. When the next war breaks out, though, China's already going to have drone technology. Russia already has it. Our enemies already have that technology. So the U.S. is not going to have that luxury of simply being able to catch up. If we're years behind, we're going to lose that war. The United States is not going to win it. I would say that with confidence right now. Unless we start working on this literally yesterday, I would say today we're already a little bit late, but it'll be better than never. We're going to lose that next war. That's just how dire this is, and I don't have no clue why our politicians are not understanding that and jumping on it.
Yeah, I would agree. Also saw NH Beach Bum ask a really good question. Let's see, NH asked, are the Ukrainian drone manufacturers state-owned armaments companies cheaper for the state to own and make weapons? No, actually, they're privatized. And that's the interesting thing about Ukraine's arms industry at the moment, is that Ukraine's companies are all privatized just like ours are, but they have completely removed the red tape for a barrier to entry, which in the United States is extreme. In the United States, there's so much red tape to creating a defense company that you basically have to have billions of dollars in financial backing and also connections in the U.S. government basically to be able to get through all the red tape to create a brand new arms company in the United States. In Ukraine, that doesn't exist. Basically, anybody with a hope and a dream and $100 can go and start an arms company in Ukraine. And they have competitive bids that are placed to where you have to be able to create a drone system that's capable of meeting the requirements that are demanded at a certain cost bracket. And you also have to, well, generally not even at a certain cost bracket, at the cheapest level possible, you have to be able to create a drone that meets the criteria. The Ukrainians will go and test them. Dozens of these companies will go and test their drones in front of the Ukrainian armed forces, basically as a weapons exhibition. And the Ukrainians will pick a company and say, that one made a great drone of this type. And they'll just go throw a contract in them and say, start producing an unlimited number of these in the largest amount you can at that price level, or even cheaper if you can. And that company then goes and pumps out those drones. And that's how the Ukrainians have it worked. And they've also gotten rid of all of the military bureaucracy that's also involved in weapons acquisitions as well. And none of that exists here in the United States. It's the complete opposite. And that's why we're starting to see that things like this are happening in war games. Because it's like concealment's great, but the drone's still going to kill them if it sees them. It's like we need something better than concealment. We need drone offensive and defensive capabilities or we're screwed. That's the simple answer of it, really. But moving us on from that and on into the actual front lines in Ukraine, we do have quite a lot to cover here. Before we get to that, though, we do have to go to Novorossiysk, because Putin did arrive in the city today, but it looks like they increased security. They shut down everything on the street that he was going to be riding down a day before he showed up. And apparently, there were security fences down the entire length of the road, 50 meters away from the sides of the street. So you couldn't even get 150 feet within the road, and every building along that road was shut down and completely locked up for Putin to be able to drive down. That's how scared they're getting and paranoid security-wise in Russia, is that they're scared if anyone even got within 150 feet of the motorcade on that road, things could go down. Pretty wild. We also were able to see the arrival of Putin in Novosibirsk in this clip right here, as he went down the street in the middle of the night, basically, at midnight. A whole street closed apparently for 150 feet across, and we believe that Russian media was allowed to film this, so I won't be able to show the entirety of it, folks, but in short, Putin is incredibly scared at this point of getting possibly taken out by the Ukrainians, it seems. But moving us on out of Novosibirsk, we also were able to see that the Orsk refinery has suffered crippling damage. Satellite photography has shown that several condenser units, or AVTs, at the refinery have been completely burned out. It looks like most of them have been. And so it seems that the Orsk refinery may be out of operation for quite the foreseeable future for the larger part. Very nice to hear. Moving us on out of Orsk and finally on into Ukraine, we were able to hear that President Zelensky, who sadly didn't make a speech today, has announced that they're trying to get the Russians to end the war by basically forcing their hand to end the conflict because it will become too costly for them to continue. But we don't really know how that's going to go. It's still probably going to take about another year for them to be able to try and bring an end to this war at this point right now. Sadly, we also were able to hear that the Ukrainian Armed Forces Air Force spokesman, Ignat, reported that the Air Force would no longer report the number of launched and destroyed ballistic missiles. The military leadership has decided to introduce restrictions on information in morning briefings regarding the number of launched and neutralized Russian missiles. They're quite unfortunate. It was a good data point to be able to get the number of missiles that were launched and shot down. We know that at this point, the ballistic missiles that were being intercepted was incredibly low. It was less than 10%. So it looks like they're no longer publishing that number, so that way the Russians maybe don't know that 90-something% of them are making it through. I don't really know what the benefit of that really is, because like, if they're still firing the ballistic missiles and they're making it through, it doesn't really hurt anyone to hear that they're firing ballistic missiles and they're making it through. But they're apparently going to start restricting that information from this point on, meaning that we will not have this data point to speak on the stream probably for the foreseeable duration of the conflict. Moving us on from that, we did get to see a Ukrainian MiG-29 shooting down a Russian drone with an R-73. Would you look at this? There goes the R-73.
I didn't know I was looking at it there for a second. I couldn't tell what was going on. I saw the reflection of the avionics in the glass. That was kind of trippy.
Man, is that a touchpad that he has down there? Do you see that?
That looks like that is it maybe like for a minute I thought maybe it was like an electronic avionics display, like the altimeter or something, but I'm not sure what that is.
But all of that stuff in the MiG is analog, though. You can see all that right up here on like the flight displays or the what is this thing called, Matthew? The backboard or something where they put all of the instruments on?
I think so. Something I just call it the avionics personally.
All of that's analog. This is apparently some sort of an additional mod that they attached to the MiG because it looks to be some sort of a touch screen or a digital screen, which I don't think a single MiG, even in Western service, has. And it looks like he was using it or doing something on it because it blipped there for a quick second before the missile fired and then stayed on afterwards for the rest of the way. I don't know if that's involved in firing the R-73s, but it looks like this MiG-29 may have some sort of a computer or systems upgrade that's been attached to it at some point in the war. Still a really cool shoot down too in the dawn hours. Really neat to see. But moving us on from that and on into the rest of our news, we also were able to see in the location unknowns the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. And two Bobcats.
They got two Bobcats. They said two Bobcats, but tell us more.
And according to Ms. Decent, keeper of the records, lower numbers lately, so this day is about average. At about 30 days to 1.5 million personnel losses. And 13 ground robotic complexes is tied as the 7th highest loss, which is unfortunately not shown. And over the course of the past 24 hours, we were able to see that 1,260 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 7 APCs, 388 supply trucks, 60 artillery pieces, 1,767 drones, 2 MLRSs, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, a very good day, and a nice thing to see that the Ukrainians are still inflicting pretty high casualties on the Russian forces. Moving us on into the front lines, we also got some footage from the Vovchansk front showing the Ukrainians hitting those very Russian forces. The 11th Border Guards unit found and destroyed this little Russian fuel truck, near to Vovchansk. Oh, so sad. And another one. And now you see them hunting down some Russian troops. Oh, believe an ATV. These days, an ATV is actually pretty high-value equipment. The Russians don't have a lot of things that are better than an ATV.
That's high-end. That's better than a Lada. Funnily enough, it probably costs more than a Lada to use one of those old beaters.
It's probably true. Really, that's kind of wild, though. An ATV costing more than a Lada, you'd think the car would cost more, but not with a Lada. Ooh, bleed. They also blew away this door that then led to shipping pallets, and they hit an electrical substation and a couple of other neat little things up here in the Vovchansk front. But moving us on from that clip and on into our next one up here, we also were able to see them hitting Russian forces and their supply trucks in this area as well. I'll only show you all a brief part of this one because we actually have a lot more to cover along the rest of the front. Look at that. The Russians like, oh, believe it. Oh, man. Honestly, they seemed like unprepared a little.
Look at this little thing. Oh, man, they are unprepared as hell.
He said, look at this little thing. Oh, man, I like that guy. Get your hands, man. Bro, he said it like that. Bro, that was pretty good, man.
Man, it was shocking. Those guys were just sitting there looking at it like, oh.
Yes. I see you know your VH well. And you, sir, do you want to grab my limp Lada? Get your hands off me. But, man, they're putting in some work up here. But moving us on out of this clip, not to show you every single vehicle that was hit, but moving us on from there and on into the Kupiansk front, we have now heard that apparently the Russians may be preparing a 100,000 troop strong offensive somewhere between Konstantinivka and also Slovyansk. Are they ever going to pull it off? I don't know. Would it ever succeed? Probably not. This is not the largest offensive that we've heard of. This is actually a mid-sized offensive, and even offensives larger than this have generally not succeeded, so we're not expecting that to make a lot of ground or leeway. We also were able to see that the Ukrainians destroyed a very rare North Korean Koksan SPG near to the area of the Severonsky Forest today. That's a picture of one of them in Iraq. The bush split.
Boom.
Jugga jugga. Eeyore! Man, I tell you, man, real. But moving us on from that clip, it's now time for us to move further on down the front and into the area of Lehman. We actually were able to get some rare pictures of Lehman, which is inside of the military zone run by the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So civilians are generally not allowed in Lehman, but we were able to see the remnants of Lehman that has been suffering battle damage quite literally ever since 2022. Lehman was first taken by the Russians in the later part of 2022 after the battles of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and the Ukrainians then pushed them out in the Balaklia counteroffensive, or the Kharkiv offensive as some people call it, at the very late end of 2022, pushing them back towards Kremenna. And now the battlefield sits quite literally between the two villages. So Lehman still is showing quite a lot of heavy battle scarring, but once again, it's a frontline town, so it always will. Moving us on from that and on down the lines and into the southern front, we were able to hear that the Ukrainians have conducted quite the offensive today. This giant swath of blue is what they achieved in one day.
That is quite a lot.
They liberated 19 settlements here in the Olesandrivsk direction. And to show you all here on the map what we're looking at, this is the front line as it exists around this area right here between Andriivka, Zeleny High, and also the town of Komar right here. You can actually see Komar right there. Komar is right here. So the Russian front line has been pushed all the way back from Zeleny High today back to Komar. So we measure the line right there from Zeleny High all the way back to Komar, meaning that my front line's accurate again. They were pushed back about a whopping 7 miles here at the farthest today, which was the deepest point of advance along the line. The rest of it was about 3 miles to 4 miles deep, meaning that this was one of the larger advances that has been conducted over the entire year by either side. I kid you not, folks. This is the largest counteroffensive, I think, in terms of square miles that has been seen as of late. The largest offensive in terms of its strategic offensive was the Ukrainian Pokrovsk offensive that, well, actually the Kupiansk offensive that happened earlier this year, where the Ukrainians were able to counterattack and completely push the Russians out of Kupiansk all the way back to Petropavlivka, and were also able to encircle what appeared to be some sort of a battalion tactical group in central Kupiansk, which was then further destroyed in detail and surrendered. So moving us on out of that bit of news on the front, which is wild to see, huge advance at this point in the war, we also were able to see the Ronin unit attacking and destroying more Russian forces and logistics just to the west of this front that the Ukrainians made significant gains in. Look at all of these little buhankas. Just nothing but buhankas of the lowest quality. Man, they running for it. We see them hitting. Oh, boy. Man, they have no mercy on Russian supply vehicles, boy. Bam. Man, that train literally floated over the car and said, "Excuse me, I just need to get the one behind you." You got a Sprinter van. You know, the Sprinter vans are starting to become a bit of a new sight, actually.
Yeah, it looks like it. Starting to upgrade.
You see them also trying to strike a fuel tank at a gas station. Damn. Well, moving us on from that and on into the rest of the news that we got from the Southern Front, we also were able to see a rare clip provided by the Russian MOD of a tornado MLRS firing on the Southern Front. Now, I generally, folks, don't show a lot of what the Russians publish because most of it's straight up propaganda, but this is one of the few times I think we've actually seen a legitimate MLRS in operation near to the front. So I wanted to actually show this one because it was just kind of interesting to look at. Oh man, epic music ensues.
Oh, a missile.
Man, I like how they have that defective radiological turkey up there in the top right corner to let you know it's Russia. Damn.
What the hell? Was that thermobaric?
I think it might have been. These are very large caliber MLRSs. I think they're 220 millimeters. So the rounds are humongous. It might have just been the shockwave and the vapors in the air from the explosion. But very interesting to see because this is one of the very few times, folks, I think we've seen the Russians put out any footage as of late that isn't just straight propaganda BS. I can also see them here hitting some sort of a bunker position of the Ukrainians as well. Apparently with the large SPG that we just saw, I believe that was a Gyansen S. But also notice, folks, that the Russians emphasize their use of conventional forces, such as artillery, while the Ukrainians always emphasize their heavy use of drone forces, showing that even with the Russians being probably the most second developed country in the world at this point with drone warfare, only next to Ukraine, they still do not consider the drone warfare element to be a significant part of their armed operations or a significant part of their propaganda initiatives whenever they publish footage. Moving us on from that and down into Mariupol, there was also a strike on the city of Mariupol and a logistics hub in the city once again. These are hit quite commonly at this point, and it looks like the Russians are probably taking significant supply attrition from these strikes in that area. And along the M14, the continuous destruction has continued, with more semi-trucks and cargo trucks being destroyed over the day along its entire length to Crimea and Kherson. And our last clip here actually shows us in this area right here, down to Crimea. Oh, this is basically the same clip, just with music. Baller. Also, that duck is pretty baller. But anyways, that is the news of the day. We do not have a speech, folks, unfortunately, from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, so that actually rounds out our entire news summary for the day. And I gotta say, folks, that we are entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that we were able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all. We hope you do stick around for the question segment, because we got quite a lot to talk about, quite a lot to yap about, folks. Yapping is what we do best, what I do best, specifically, and I love to yap about anything and everything, and I know y'all do too. It's the Yapaholic session, and so we're about to be getting right into that here in this question segment, where we can talk about literally anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare, whether the Iranians should be nuked under certain circumstances, and a couple of other things that I do not really want to mention because the list is getting long these days. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get into it, and I gotta thank y'all incredibly once again for enjoying y'all's time, hopefully here on the show tonight, and I hope y'all have enjoyed the coverage. So Matthew, without further ado, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump right into our final question segment, which includes our super chats, our live chats, and Morse code decoders, and unfortunately, no speech to get to, which is a disappointment, because we love that speech. We love a good speech. We love speech, but no speech tonight. So jumping right back into our super chats, our first one's going to go to none other than JMP Traveler, and thank you very much, JMP, for that $20 support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And he said, how can you compare the Russian Black Fleet to the Coast Guard? And Coast Guard has more ships afloat and sunk 12 U-boats during World War II, which is double what the Soviet fleet did. And take a question from the chat.
Well, the reason why is because the Coast Guard is not really designed to conduct surface warfare with, say, the German Navy or the Imperial Japanese Navy. And that's really more so why I was saying that, is that Russia has a coastal protection force that might be capable of some limited actions, but they're not capable of blue water surface combatant actions like a proper Navy should be within that area. And that's why I compared them to that. No disrespect or anything to the Coast Guard, but also I would say that anyone who's under the illusion that the Coast Guard's going to take on the PLAN from the People's Republic of China and win would probably be a bit misplaced. The Coast Guard just isn't designed for that sort of a thing. The Coast Guard's designed to hold down large areas of water and conduct policing actions for the greater part. The U.S. Navy is the one that's designed to be able to go up against larger surface combatants. Same thing in Russia. Russia has a Coast Guard, and they're made for coastal patrol operations and limited operations like, say, taking out a U-boat or a submarine, which would largely be defenseless against a surface vessel that's literally on top of them dropping depth charges, but they're never going to be able to take on an actual capital fleet of another nation. Even Turkey at this point would give the Russian Black Sea Fleet, or whatever's left of it, a very difficult time because they don't even have anything to really fight the surface fleet of the Turkish Navy. So I hope that does address that the best I can, JMP Traveler. And also, like, I had to address it seriously, JMP, because I was looking, I was like, I don't know if it's a joke or serious. I was like, I don't know. But beyond that, though, if it was a joke, well, I mean, like, no offense to the Coast Guard, but if it was a serious question, that would be my answer. But beyond that, though, we will make sure to take a question from the chat in your honor. And I got to thank you greatly once again for supporting the channel and helping to keep on running. So what we got, Matthew, in honor of JMP Traveler?
And the live chat goes to TS Actual, who said, will we see a major attack on HQs of the Kerch Bridge very soon?
That's a good question. I don't know if they're going to be attacking the Kerch Bridge soon, because they actually flew drones right over its air defense perimeter and apparently didn't hit it from what we could tell. And as far as their military headquarters, like the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don, I'm not entirely sure. For some reason, the Ukrainians don't really go out of their way to directly attack the headquarters, and I think that's to try and avoid reciprocal attacks being conducted by the Russians on their headquarters in Ukraine. They generally try and assassinate generals when they're not at their headquarters and they're at their private residences instead, or out at some sort of a social function or an event, so that way it's not at the headquarters. So I don't ever think they're going to hit the headquarters, probably because the reason they don't want reciprocal strikes or a justification for reciprocal strikes. And also another thing to add is that I don't really know if they're willing to hit the Kerch Bridge yet. We've kind of justified that they haven't hit it yet because they may be using it as an evacuation corridor or allowing it to be used as an evacuation corridor for civilians. And once they ascertain that the maximum number of civilians have left and the crossings are non-existent largely on the Kerch, they might hit the bridge then and then knock it out to deprive the Russians of any sort of a supply capacity that could be operated from that bridge. So a huge thanks to you once again for the support, JMP Traveler, and helping this channel to keep running. I also say, JMP Traveler say, it's a joke. Oh, good. Like, thank goodness. I thought you were seriously offended. I was like, I don't mean any offense to the Coast Guard. I didn't mean that at all by my statement. But still, big shout out to the Coast Guard. Coast Guard is really something. If y'all don't know, folks, actually to give a big shout out to the Coast Guard has one of the most difficult basic trainings in the entirety of the armed forces. I believe that their dropout rate is far higher than most any other basic training, and also it's because they're an incredibly small branch. I don't even think they fall under the Department of Defense anymore. I think it's the Department of Homeland Security that they fall under, but they're still technically a branch of the armed forces. But they have about 10,000 service members, and I think they're just a little bit larger than the Space Force. The Space Force isn't tough as far as their basic to physically get through. Space Force is more so for the brainiacs. The Coast Guard is for people who have to have brains and also a significant amount of physical aptitude, because the Coast Guard is a physically strenuous job most of the time whenever they get called into action. So really cool branch, honestly. Very, very undersung branch as well, because they do a lot of interesting stuff that doesn't really fall under the normal maritime realm that people think of when they think of the Navy. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Mr. Glock, who's there, LSA. And thank you, good sir, as well, for that $20 support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, what about the Ukraine counteroffensive northeast of the Donetsk border? And other bloggers are reporting 26 Ukrainian villages were retaken in the last few days.
From what we were able to hear, it's 19, but the number doesn't really matter. 26, 19, it's very close. Like, there's smaller settlements, but it has been quite the successful counteroffensive at this point around the area of Velika Novorossiysk, because currently they're fighting around Zeleny High and around, I believe it's around the Vovcha River, which is something of a defensive barrier here because the Russians would have to ford the Vovcha River, which might be low because of the drought that's currently going on in most of Europe and really around the world. But beyond that, though, they have been able to push the Russians back at the deepest point of advance, about 8 miles, and they have been able to liberate a significant amount of villages. Sadly, the Ukrainians haven't talked about it a great deal. They just kind of made the announcement. They're like, hey, we did it. And they didn't really get into anything else. They didn't even really show any footage of it. So our analysis is quite limited because we just don't have a lot to work with or a lot to break down and analyze. But it does appear that this counteroffensive has been quite successful and has most likely regained about 150 square miles for the armed forces of Ukraine, which would be one of the largest singular offensives or advances that we've seen by either side during this year of the war. So a huge thanks to you for the support, Glock, who's there, and helping this channel to keep it running. And I do have to say, quite an accomplishment. And I wish the Ukrainians would publicize that a lot more and really scream it from the mountaintops, and also give a little bit of additional details, because it would allow for us folks to make it into a big story and actually cover it as a large piece of nightly news if they did that, which keeps them kind of in the focal point. Because if they don't do that, it's really hard for us to make a story on it and cover it as a mainframe part of a news show. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here a $20 super chat from none other than Marion Deemert. And thank you, Marion, as well, for that generous $20 support. And Marion said, Igor was the crazy driver a long time ago. My bad. And any info about the sailors on the ship Abe Lincoln? It seems like they have been forgotten, and it's very sad.
Man, I remember that clip from back in the day. Man, they had that big ass, what was it, the Akhmat armored car, or it was a Tiger M in the Russian army, and they're in Kherson, and he said, hit it, and then bro, they were all sitting on the windshield. Wait a minute. Yeah, that was Tony.
I think it was
Okay!
Tony. I don't think
yeah.
it was Igor. Igor was the guy, the Igor, it was that guy. I think that was a different one. The driver, I think, was Tony. Tony was the one, driving, BMPs in ditches and stuff like that.
Bro, Tony did those guys dirty, man. He flipped that Tiger M so hard, they went flying like a pieces across the road. It's like, man, that's a tough one. But let's see, Igor, I think, was one of the crazy drivers. I forgot though. It's such a long time ago. Those those incidents with the drivers, like Igor and Tony, I think those were like 3.5 or 4 years ago. They're so long ago, it's hard to even remember them. Outside of like the visual of it, like I remember it perfectly, folks. They were driving down that road in Kherson with Tony at the wheel of that Tiger, and that guy on the front windshield was literally, his fat ass was blocking the driver's view. He couldn't even see what was in front of him, so he starts running off of the road, and then they're all yelling, "Tony, Tony, Blair!" Like, and he flings it hard left, and then he almost goes flying into the other ditch. So then he flings it hard right, and then a hard left again. And when he did that last hard left, it flipped the whole truck over. Like, the whole truck went over sideways, and all the guys that were on the hood and on the roof went just flying off at like 50 miles an hour in every direction as the Tiger slammed onto its side, just went skidding down the road. It was like sparks everywhere and everything. That was a crazy clip. Honestly insane. Well, I wish I could find that one and show it right now, because that would be great for some laughs. But as far as outside of that, though, the Abraham Lincoln story is one that's gotten a lot clearer after the sailors returned. And folks, I gotta say, I find it very interesting. I also find it very interesting, Marion, how the story has changed so much for some people. Because I remember saying when they were there, like, we were hearing the rumors and the reports coming from the ship, and the press was reporting it from leaks, that the quality and the conditions on board these carriers was becoming absolutely abysmal. And people wanted to go, "Oh, that's not true. That's nothing but fake news bullshit. They're just trying to desecrate the name of our great president, our great leader." And I was like, "Oh no, probably not. I mean, that's probably actually the case." And then when they finally come back and all those sailors are like, "Yeah, it actually sucked on board and all those reports were true," now people want to say, "Oh, they're just wusses." It's like I don't know who in the world are the people saying that kind of stuff, but it's like, have they ever been in conditions like that? And also the real question is, has the president ever been in conditions like that? I have a feeling not. Like, where he's eating 2 tortillas and a half cup of rice. So it's like, maybe we ought to say that's not great conditions for those sailors to be in. That would be my thinking. But basically, the rundown of the story, Marion Demon, is that the conditions on the Abraham Lincoln were not understated according to the leaks and the insider reports that were coming out from U.S. officials talking about the conditions on the ship. The food had almost completely run out. Most crew members were only eating 2 tortillas and a half cup of rice each meal per day, so a starving diet basically, with absolutely no flavor or variety or anything involved. And also, the toilets started to completely clog on the Abraham Lincoln, so the ship was overflowing with sewage and shit and smelled like it, I would assume. And let's see here, what else? I think a couple of the other basic facilities and functions of the ship were also breaking down. Most of it is the quality of life kind of stuff, like, being able to crap in a toilet and know that the crap is going to go into some sort of a tank or over the side of the ship, so it's not, literally just growing inside the ship and festering and rotting. And those sorts of things were all apparently true. So the morale completely plummeted. And as a result of the morale plummet, and also the fact that they couldn't contact or talk to any family, a couple of the crew members apparently started to jump overboard. Why they did that? To swim to shore. But they weren't anywhere near shore. The reality is that they're just jumping off the ship because they couldn't take it anymore, if we're being honest. But it was apparently absolutely brutal and Spartan conditions that were on ship at that point. So a huge thanks to your support and help this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a $50 support from none other than Blind Man. And thank you, Blind Man, as well, for the very generous $50 support. That's the second 50 of the night. We do appreciate that. He said, "Hello there, and the Perseid meteor shower is picking up tonight, and it usually happens when Earth passes through the Swift-Tuttle comet debris tail. Burn color equals comet makeup, red's nitrogen oxygen, yellow's iron, purple's calcium, orange is sodium, and teal's magnesium, and LOT LSA. And also, I think there was that eclipse today. I think in some parts of the world, I think like maybe Greenland or Spain or something, there was a eclipse where it completely covered the sun today, which was quite interesting to see. I don't think it had an effect here in America, at least where we're at in Utah. It didn't have an effect. I didn't really notice anything today with anything like that. But that is fascinating, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
That is really cool, honestly. I've never actually seen a comet before. I think I've seen a couple of small meteors, but they were like so quick when they would pop up and disappear. I would never really see them too well. It's always like in my periphery. But I've never seen a comet before. I would like to see one someday and actually get to know what that looks like. Because usually it's just nothing but stars up there. Like it's no comets or anything. So that'd be kind of neat to see. And also really cool to know that the different makeups of the comets or the meteors actually creates different kinds of tail colors. Me personally, I'd have to say my favorite meteor is that one up from Flint, Michigan, because they said, "Man, what's your tail color?" He's like, "Girl, ain't got no tail." But beyond that, though.
Oh,
Man, we gotta laugh. But man, huge thanks to you once again for the support, Blind Man, and helping this channel to keep running, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we're on to the next one.
and moving on to our next one here, this one's going to go to Really Somebody, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Really Somebody, for that support as well. They said, my BFF lands in Lithuania's capital on September the 25th and will travel through the country for a week. And I begged him to cancel, but he keeps just saying he'll monitor the situation. And how worried should I be? Honestly, I wouldn't be like extremely worried. Like you could probably go there and be fine, but at the same time, though, it's not going to be exactly what you'd call completely mundane and safe. As I mean, Russia is making threats toward those countries. They also are sending, drones very close to airspace. They're sending missiles into Poland. So there's always the possibility that out of the blue something could break out. But you're probably okay going, but I would definitely be cautious at least. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's probably fine in the here and the now. Like if it's going to be around now, September 25th. Yeah, that'll probably be fine. I don't think anything crazy is going to be happening. And the honest truth is that if anything does happen, it's probably not going to affect him personally. Like unless he's like around like an oil refinery, an oil storage tank, or a power plant or something. It probably won't even affect him because what we're thinking the Russians are probably going to do this fall is something along the lines of a drone attack, or they're going to use the border guards to conduct a very small incursion into a Baltic state. That seems to be what most likely would happen. So as long as he's not directly on the border or near any critical infrastructure, he'd probably be fine. And if he wasn't, um, as long as they haven't closed the Suwalki Gap, if he has like a rental car or he's riding the train or something, he can just ride the train out of Lithuania and down into Poland or Germany, and then hop on a flight from there. Or you could just keep taking the train further west until you eventually get to a place where you can get a flight out of there. He could do the Uno reverse, and instead of being like a Moroccan going into Spain, he could be from Spain going into Morocco to get a flight back to America. So that could work. But beyond that, though, I would say it's probably going to be fine. Just make sure, to be aware of your surroundings and not be near anything that would be considered a strategically critical target or near to a border area. So a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Game Theory, and Game Theory said, I heard on the USS Lincoln they were working 18-hour days, and that will drive anyone crazy.
Yeah, like I also heard that as well. That's one thing I haven't included yet, but apparently they were working 18-hour days, which here on this channel, we work on my peak days. Usually I work like 8-hour days or 7.5-hour days. It's like 7.5 hours to 8, usually on these live stream days. But if I ever make a short war video, that adds about another 3 hours to the whole working day. So then I get up to like 11 or 10. And I will tell you folks that when you go all out like that, for any period of time where like even at 10 and 11 hours a day, that's very tiring to a point. It's like, man, I really want to get a break, especially if it's 7 days a week. Like it has been in some days, like where it's like 13 days straight of like 10-hour or 11-hour days every single day, or there's breaking news stuff going on. And then we're on that amount of time with a short video and a stream. That stuff gets extremely exhausting. I couldn't even imagine what 18 hours a day would be like. That would be absolutely impossible to deal with for any long period of time, because even doing 10 and 11 is exhausting. I mean, imagine 18. And also, like, I remember so vividly, speaking of that game theory, that I was here on the channel along with Matthew, and we're like, man, that's probably not good for their morale, to be working them like dogs, with the sewage clogging up, with the laundromat fire that burned out the berths where they're sleeping on tables. That's probably not good for morale. A lot of these people are probably not going to re-enlist. I remember a lot of people going, "Oh, they're just wishes, they're weak bitches." It's like, well, shit. It's like if that's how you want to treat them, don't be whining and complaining when all of them don't enlist and they are not able to man the carriers properly and they have to try and find crews for them. It's like, that's going to be the reality of it. If they keep getting treated like that, people aren't going to be staying in the Navy. But still, a big thanks to you for the support and help this channel to keep on running, Game Theory, and we can thank you greatly for the support. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have another $20 super chat from Marion Deemer once again, and thank you, Marion, once more for the support. And Marion said, thanks for the honesty, and we should be ashamed of how we treat our sailors. It's kind of brutal. And honestly, they should be ashamed of it, really, because I mean, and now granted, there will always be outliers. Like, for example, there will always be people that generally weren't really cut out for the military, and they kind of go in there and then they realize that too late. And at that point, they've signed a contract, so they're kind of stuck. And then they do desperate stuff. But, if it's becoming something that's becoming common where it's being reported on, I would say we can't just write that off instantly. It's just the outliers doing something different. Like, it sounds to me like it could become a systemic problem. That's what it sounds like. But Enforcer, what say you?
It sounds to me like the people who are in charge are trying to prioritize certain kinds of results more so than any sort of quality or morale, and that will come at tremendous cost. I think it's pretty crappy how a lot of people in the military get treated. Some of that is just because of the endemic structure of the armed forces. It's just kind of crappy as a fact of life, really, if we're being honest. Like, how a sergeant can come in and have an absolute power trip. I'm sure many of the folks who were enlisted know about that one. When a sergeant would come in and just be an absolute ass and try and screw over your life just because he could, and you can't do anything about it, that's just going to come with the institution, because there's really no way to change that. But when it comes to something like the food, or the food rations on board, are becoming extremely slim, and we're basically putting them on like a 1,000 or a 1,200 calorie diet daily because there's no food to go around, that's absolutely brutal. And also putting them on 18-hour work days and then having the carrier basically falling apart under them because it's been on deployment for so long, all that kind of stuff is absolutely abject, and I don't really know why in the world we would have an administration that says that they respect the armed forces and they respect the people in the armed forces, but then actually treat them like they don't really matter when it actually comes to it, when they're the people actually running the ships that are fighting the war. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a $10 support from Wired by Waylon. And thank you, Waylon, for the $10 support. He said, we built an army capable of fighting an army like our army. And that's the trouble with always being on the cutting edge. We should have learned from Ukraine and Russia.
We always that's kind of true. We always try and design our military and our doctrine off of what our next peer adversary or near peer adversary is going to look like. So how the military doctrine works, and it's worked like this forever, is we go, okay, who is our main adversary globally? And it'll be like, oh, it's China. Okay, well, let's build our whole doctrine around fighting a war against China. And then we might have a side doctrine of fighting a war in Europe against Russia, but we're mostly going to be prioritizing China. And then something like the war in Ukraine happens, and we have this whole doctrinal phase that we're working on, which usually takes about 8 to 10 years to implement properly. And then by then, we're already moving on to the next doctrine. And in the midst of that, the war in Ukraine's roaring on, and we're seeing that the whole concept doctrinally that we have of warfare is completely flawed, and we also have a superior doctrine right in front of us that we can implement that would even do well against the Chinese. And instead of doing that, we're like, no, we're still going to push forward our old doctrines on China and Europe like it's still the 2010s. It's like it's not the 2010s anymore. This is the 2020s. Things have completely changed. We just need to take the old doctrine, throw it out the window, and start weapons acquisitions and tactical developments and strategic developments that factor in what wars look like now. It's like that, if we don't do that, we are going to go into a new war, and we are going to be on the back foot, and we're going to have to quickly try and get to the cutting edge. But the thing about that is, folks, is that while we could get to the cutting edge and turn everything around, that's going to be at the cost of a tremendous amount of lives and material at the start of the conflict, because our forces will be completely unprepared for the actual war that they're going to be fighting. But a huge thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. And I would definitely agree, we should have learned from the Ukrainians, and we should be learning from them right now. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we're on to the next one.
We also have a $20 super chat from another channel legend. It is Tom Exman. And thank you very much, Tom, for the 20 also. We do
Hey!
appreciate that. He said, take a live chat and thanks.
And a huge thanks to your support, Tom Exman. A tremendous thanks to you. You're helping us to keep the lights on, keep food in our bellies, and keep this show running. And we will make sure to take a live chat in your honor. And so, what we got in honor of Tom Exman?
And Tom's live chat is going to go to none other than Sophia, who said, is the Ukrainian army still taking foreign conscripts?
I think so. I do know there's still a lot of international volunteers over there. It's just that I don't think any of them are in the International Legion. The International Legion was dissolved because it was a very problematic unit. In short, there were like some people who were basically running like little mafia-like gangs in the Foreign Legion, and every once in a while a Foreign Legionnaire would show up dead somewhere in Ukraine, and it would be under very mysterious circumstances. So because of all that, they completely dissolved the Foreign Legion, and they just started sending foreign contingents, different language or cultural groups to different units in the Ukrainian armed forces. So one brigade will have an American attached unit, another one will have a Brazilian unit, and so on and so forth. So you can join. It's just that I wouldn't really know how the process works since the International Legion has been dissolved. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And a huge thanks to Tom Exman for sponsoring our live chat and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have here a $10 super chat from Game Theory once again, who said, under today's presidential memorandum authorizing private contractors to conduct offensive cyber operations, what is to stop the contractors from using the info for private gain? Now, actually, like they've been using contractors for a very long time for like cyber defense specifically, and all these different contractors they have classified security clearances. Most of them do. So if you get hired by one of these groups, you have to usually go get that clearance. You have to be able to qualify for it for the most part. I know a couple of people that went into that. So it's really the people going in there. They're not like loonies or something like that. They've gone through a very extensive vetting process, and generally they're not on the fringe. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. We should be probably good. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say we probably be fine. Sadly, I really don't know a lot about the cyber warfare side of anything either, so I kind of had to just defer to Matthew and what he says and thinks about that, because that's not really my forte when it comes to speaking on the military or any of our doctrine or strategy or anything. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I also just saw a live chat. Not Hideo Ku said, Obama probably arguably started the drone doctrine with the MQ-8. I would say not quite. Like, drones definitely did come around during his administration, but those drones are more so conducting conventional tasks and are not really evolving, say, the battlefield. Like say, for example, World War II. What did we do for recon back then? We took a guy in a Spitfire or a Mustang, we kitted them out with cameras, and then we flew them over a position and they snapped pictures of it, and we bring those pictures back and develop the film, and we take a look at what they photographed. With a modern day drone like an MQ-8 or an MQ-9, they basically just do the same thing. It's just that they don't have a pilot on board. They're autonomously operated. So we're sending up basically the same old recon planes that we've done for ages at this point, literally since the Second World War, and even since the First World War, to just go up and kind of take pictures and film the battle space. That way we can see what's going on from a bird's eye view. The drone warfare that we're seeing now has completely changed that, and it started to weaponize it in a massive scale. So instead of it just being reconnaissance, it is able to conduct significant numbers of strikes. It's able to defeat armor. It's able to defeat infantry. It's able to defeat other drones. It's able to conduct reconnaissance, long-range strike like a cruise missile or a ballistic missile. It's basically able to do everything. You can even have the UGVs on the ground at this point roll up onto a position and just start laying machine gun fire with a 50 BMG right into the entrance of a dugout and suppress them until the actual infantry move forward and then completely suppress and destroy that position. It's like that's a completely different kind of drone warfare. I would say like the MQ-8s and whatnot was kind of like drones in their most infantile period, and it's not even like the drone warfare era. It's just more so something that was attached to the conventional warfare era. But the current age that we're in is completely different than that was by far. That's at least how I look at it. But you know, of course that kind of stuff is subjective, folks, and it's opinionated, and that's how I will look at it. But some other people might say, no, it definitely started then, because that was when the technology came onto the field for the first time ever in any form. But with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Uncovered Cube, who said, my son's first day of 8th grade, he picked 3 patches for his new backpack, and he stole my LSA first. And also, that's
Really?
pretty cool, by the way. He said, habitual line crosser, second, and Blue Angels third in LSA.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really neat, actually. And I gotta say, a huge thanks to your support on Covered Cube. And that is really cool to know that the LSA flag is getting some rep somewhere in a high school or a middle school or something. That is really cool to hear. And I gotta thank you greatly for the support. I gotta say, honestly, that like for some reason, I'm like, wow, that is so cool. That is so neat. And there's probably some kid in school gonna be like, what is that? Your kid might be, oh, it's the LSA, and like explain it all. That'd be really cool, actually. But still, a huge thanks to you for the support and help this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here a 5 from Jesus Crisco, who said, rent free, GGEZ.
FREE, that spells free, creditreport.com, baby. But still, a huge thanks to you for your support and rent free. I wish. Like, man, rent ain't cheap. But still, a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Ian Mitson, and thank you, Ian, as well, for that 5. And he did not leave a comment, as far as I can tell, but a huge shout to Ian, once again, for helping to keep the channel running. And we also have a 5 from Swad775, who said, hello from Lou Cornwall in the UK. A very nice place, by the way. He said, given that history is written by the victors, how do you think this period will be documented in, say, 50 years? And thanks in LSA.
And I thank you for the support. And I don't mean to be a contrarian all the time, but history isn't really written by victors. It's kind of a blend of everybody writing it. And usually, whenever whenever mainstream history or the story of mainstream history is told, it is usually muddled in so many different ways that it isn't even really history. It's more of a story inspired by the events. And so if we're talking about like that mainstream story of what will be told here in America, I don't really know because it depends on what they think. Like, and that's also something really interesting too to even talk about right now. If you ask someone in America right now the history of the United States and they're a Republican, they're going to tell you one story of American history. If you ask a liberal, they're going to tell you, or a Democrat, they're going to tell you a totally different lens of history. It's the same story, but told completely differently depending on who's telling it. And so it's really hard to say what America is going to look like in 50 years, like what the mindset's going to be, what the people are going to be like, what they think, and what the different groups are, because they're going to cherry pick different parts of the story to tell. But if I was to say what I would say 50 years from now, myself personally, what the story would look like, I would say that it was a time of great instability, either a time that got very close to a world war, or this was the lead up to a world war. And we were largely fighting the proxy wars that we did in the Cold War in multiple different fronts around the world, in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and also East Asia, to be able to try and hold back these Axis forces from encroaching on our sphere of influence and also greatly depleting our quality of life while improving theirs. I would say that would generally be the way I would describe it in 50 years from now, but I personally don't know either, because maybe in hindsight, knowing historical events I don't know yet, I would say something completely different. It's hard. It's so hard to say. It's difficult to say, honestly, almost impossible, really, when I think about it. But man, what would you say, Matthew? 50 years from now, what would you say?
I would personally say in 50 years, I'll probably say this is probably the beginning stages of World War III. That's probably what they'll look on it and say that. Excuse me, by the way, you go over here like getting that sand in the mouth again from that salt lake drying up. But I would say they'll probably look back on it and say it's the beginning stages of World War III, and it was probably the very preliminary parts of it. Right as the two hemispheres of the world, the Axis powers and the new Allied powers, are basically forming together. Because I would say, looking at how consolidated North Korea, Russia, China, and these Axis powers truly are, it really looks like the lead up to World War II. Like, it really does. It has the same kind of look to it. So yeah, I would imagine they'll probably be saying that. Hopefully it wouldn't have dragged on that long, by the way. Hopefully World War III wouldn't have dragged on for 50 years. So it'll probably be well over with at that point, if it gets there. Hopefully we're not in a nuclear hellfire at that point.
Oh, I also see some people saying, man, so they're going to have so many things to say about the presidents that have been around, this one and the last one. They'll probably smooth that all out, truth be told. They'll smooth it out into, well, there was some constitutional problems that came up then. That's probably what they'll do by then, because that's what they do on a lot of stuff. Like when they talk about FDR, they don't talk about FDR as in he basically completely broke with tradition and tried to turn himself into a dictator in his own right. and he died in the office. That's the only way they got him out. They don't tell you the story that way, which is kind of the reality of it. They tell you the story of, oh, well, FDR was just so popular and he was a great wartime leader, and he just unfortunately died from, a massive heart attack at his house in Marietta, Georgia. They don't tell you the actual, like, the kind of the reality of it. And then they'll tell you about Abraham Lincoln. Oh, Abraham Lincoln was a great president. They won't tell you about how he suspended the writ of habeas corpus and a whole bunch of other stuff that a lot of people called him a bastard for at the time, and a lot of people right after the war, even after his death, still called him a bastard for doing that. Nowadays, it's generally kind of whitewash because they never really want to make U.S. presidents look horrific. They don't want to make any of them look terrible or that they're infringing on rights or anything. Even my guy that I really like a great deal, Teddy Roosevelt. Like, I even have kind of like a cherry-picked vision of him because there were some things that he did that weren't really the greatest. But that's all perspective. Like, if you really feel like a lot of what we done hasn't amounted to hill of beans, you can find something negative to say about everyone and every event in American history. But if you like America, you're going to completely overlook all the stuff they did that was wrong or questionable. You're just going to make it sound like everything's been great forever and nothing ever went wrong. But I mean, Teddy Roosevelt used the army to basically go in as scabs at a point and completely circumvent the strikers and also the company bosses that own the mines where the strikes were being conducted to mine coal in West Virginia, which could definitely be looked at as executive overreach. Also, the Great White Fleet, which was one of his greatest achievements of his administration and foreign policy, where the U.S. Navy sailed around the world basically conducting a goodwill venture. That was not done with any congressional authority at all. The Congress said that was an unnecessary expense and they weren't willing to pay for it. And Teddy Roosevelt said, well, screw you, I'm sending them anyways. You better find the funding because otherwise they're going to be stranded in Australia. And they went on their way to Australia. It's like, that's definitely executive overreach and not really respecting the balance of power, but it's all perspective. Because I would say those things are outweighed by the good that Teddy Roosevelt did, but others would say that those things make Teddy Roosevelt a demon, regardless of whatever good he did. It's all perspective based. That's the interesting thing about the world, is that depending on the person, they have a completely different view and a completely different way that they deal with the world than anyone else does. It's a really interesting thing. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Remed YYC, and thank you as well for that support. They said there's a certain outlet out there reporting that the Russian economy is still growing, and how can that be? And I've seen the same videos, and the damage is immense.
I think those people are probably lying, like I would assume, because I haven't seen any GDP figures come out for the Russian Federation as of late, but everything that they have is not showing a growing economy. Their stock market's shrinking. Their oil revenues have plummeted almost down to nothing. Their grain revenues are now going to be plummeting to nothing, and the wild berries company is getting literally just completely destroyed. So I don't really know how they could say the economy is growing when a lot of the industrial plant that produces economic growth is quite literally being destroyed by Ukrainian attacks. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also saw someone say in the chat in response to what I was saying about Lincoln, a war that freed the slaves, by the way. Yeah, it did free the slaves, but if you like there's a lot of nuance to that. And that's like the gray area that gets into it. Lincoln was actually just wanting to compromise and say that the west of the United States, which had not been accepted into statehood yet and it was still all territories, would be slave free. That's what he was actually going for initially, and he didn't want to originally go for emancipation of the slave populations of the South. But when the Civil War got into its zenith and the public started to get radicalized in the North, he did it as something of a political compromise, to be completely honest, to be able to appease certain radical Republicans in the Congress at that time, so that way he could continue to get the support he needed to continue on the war. When you get into the actual details of it, it wasn't something where Lincoln was like, oh, I'm going to free the slaves, by the way, like off the get-go. That wasn't even like his actual intention. He just did that kind of as a political compromise. And then that's when you get into the perspective. It's like, well, they were freed, so that's a great thing. But then other people would say, well, he didn't legitimately mean it. He just did it for a political compromise. So then it doesn't really mean anything. And then you get into the perspective and opinion of that. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Benny, and thank you, Benny, as well. He said, Matt, did you know that Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas are the largest rail hub in the United States of America? That could be some possible threat there with Iran making those threats recently. Honestly, I would say the biggest threat right now that Iran could pull off is the cyber attacks. That's probably threat number one. We've seen them conduct that already. And also, I hate to say it because it's a horrendous thing, but Iran might try to conduct attacks on crowds. Like that's just like the low hanging fruit that Iran might go for, which is horrendous to say the least. But basically, people have to be very vigilant these days when they get out in crowds. Very much so, because you never know which place is going to get hit, and you don't know who's going to be pulling it off and how many people are going to be involved in it. So that generally crowds, I'm not a huge fan of crowds for that reason, especially right now during these very like contentious times with foreign countries really hating the United States. I'm generally very hesitant to go into crowds these days for that reason. But not to say that you should avoid crowds completely, but you definitely want to be on your toes, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
And actually, yeah, you're right, Benny. Kansas City is one of the biggest rail hubs in the country. It's not the biggest, though. The biggest is Chicago. Chicago is kind of centrally located as far as like it's located centrally for the industry of the United States of America. So every major rail company in America actually has an interchange in Chicago. But Kansas City is one of the biggest ones in the Midwest. That is actually correct. And as far as attacks on railroad infrastructure, I have to say is kind of like a saving grace of the railroads. Thank God they're almost like sabotage proof outside of bridges. Bridges are really the only thing that you can actually damage or destroy on a railroad that will really cause any damage. You try and like blow up a diesel electric unit, you might lose it, but luckily you can kind of just rebuild it if you wanted to. If it wasn't too damaged, you could quite literally rebuild the whole thing off the frame and get that running again. If you try and blow up the tracks nowhere where there's a bridge and it's just on flat ballast, that's pretty easy to fix as well. Funnily enough, a lot of people don't know this, but the Army tried to find out if they could easily blow up railways with saboteurs in the Second World War, and they actually found out that you can cut basically almost like a 6-foot gap in a rail, and a rail engine can run right over that. You can cut both rails at the same spot 6 feet. 6 feet from one rail to the next, and the train will actually, for the most part, actually just carry on right through that void and right onto the next rails, climb up on them, and keep going, which is kind of shocking. So it's almost impossible in reality to really sabotage a railroad. There's a couple of key vulnerable points, bridges being the most important, engine houses and car repair shops being the second most important, and really nothing else. You could try and knock out the wiring to the signal blocks, and that could cause some delays, but that could also be fixed quite easily because maintenance away crews are generally designed to be able to deal with those sorts of problems and fix them immediately, because if the company is not running trains, it's losing money. So the kind of a saving grace of the railroads is that they are very hard to be able to put out of action. On the other hand, though, like Matthew's saying, crowds are going to be the biggest threat that would exist, at least for an attack, because it is the easiest thing to be able to take advantage of. It's a large crowd. Security is already going to be overstretched trying to deal with what it has, and also it's going to be the thing that sows the most terror in the public and maybe starts to sway public opinion against continuing conflict with Iran, because they don't want that kind of stuff to continue here in the United States. So that's probably what they would more so go for, because it would produce the most direct effect, in a sense, than infrastructure attacks like that. But a big thanks to you for your support and help this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Remed YYC once again, who put in a 5 and said, Black Sea Fleet, more like the Black Sea Museum, am I right? LOL. Honestly, it kind of is the I would say the tail-tucked fleet, I would say, the one that runs off. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree. It is quite something right there. I tell you, that Black Sea Fleet is just garbage, and all the little stupid coastal patrol boats they have, it's like that's not doing anything for them after the war. It's like maybe they'd stop a Turkish ship from entering Novorossiysk, but that's it. Nothing else is capable from the fleet they have left. But a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I also saw Paul say switch gears and points. Nah, not really. Most of those are locked, actually. Like that's also something that came around lately, because there were some idiots on TikTok that actually go around and flip switches on oncoming trains where the switches were not locked with an actual padlock, and they actually run the trains off into sidings and into sitting rail cars and whatnot. So almost every single switch point these days actually has a padlock on it to stop you from just switching it if you want, or if you tried to blow it up, it's not really going to do a whole lot because they actually have pre-assembled switches kind of on demand. So they can just cut out that section of switch, lift it up with a crane, move to the side, and plop a brand new one in. And generally, it's not too complicated to do that. The switch box might be difficult to replace, though, but even that, they still have spare parts available on demand at most maintenance away facilities to be able to replace those as well. So with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Mark Dixon, and thank you, Mark, as well, for the $5 support, and we do appreciate that. And we also have a
Hey!
5 from Becca B, and thank you, Becca, as well, for the 5. And it said they just held a press conference, the U.S. leadership did, and said that the leader of the RGC gave a friendship bracelet, the most incredible friendship bracelet ever. And also, by the way, she's joking, by the way, just make that clear. I'm sure most people got that anyway, but just make it clear. But, yeah, honestly, really, like, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I wanted to say, it's the greatest friendship bracelet anyone ever saw. It's beautiful. People say, sir, the pearls, they're so nice. They're so great. But nobody has pearls like that. Nobody has pearls like that. And I got to say, great thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. Keep it running. So a humongous thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Game Theory, who said that Ukraine hasn't been taken over by lobbyists yet for government contracts. But they have a different problem, though. Ukraine has a problem of corruption. They still have that problem. Just because we support Ukraine doesn't mean we're like blind or ignorant to that. Ukraine definitely has a very, I guess you could say, a systemic or structural corruption problem. Although it used to be very unique. But now, with the United States kind of becoming that way itself, the U.S. really doesn't have much room to talk because the U.S. is also delving deep into corruption to a level that the country's probably never seen before. So I hate to say it, but Ukraine used to be an outlier with that, where it was like, oh, Ukraine's so corrupt. It's like, well, they're kind of corrupt as everybody else at this point, really, I would say.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like I mean, honestly though, it's like that argument kind of was lame because it's like if they're corrupt, it's like, well, the country they're fighting is far more corrupt than them. So it's like, what's really the argument here? That like there's no side to back because those people usually say Ukraine's corrupt, so the Russians are in the right, but it's like the Russians are even more corrupt. But Ukraine does have corruption issues. But really though, I do have to kind of say, like, not to like try and make false equivalents here, but is it really any worse than the corruption we have here in America right now? Like, if we're being
That's what I was
completely honest,
saying.
yeah, like it's like that's kind of like the whole question to ask. Like, that's the big one. It's like not really. I mean, if anything, it's basically identical. So it's like if we're trying to say Ukraine's too corrupt, this is where it's like, are we trying to say something about ourselves, or something here in this country? Because honestly, if you point at anything that Ukraine does these days and go, oh, that's clear corruption, I can find an exact example of that here in the U.S. government. But anyway,
Corruption Corruption is bad if I'm not involved, but if I'm involved, I defend it.
I defend it. Like, man,
Man, honestly, he was telling the truth.
I like that one Louis Theroux documentary where he went to Nigeria and he was like the Labour boss, so he basically like runs the show. And he's like literally running a gang on the streets of Lagos, like they basically ran like a racket and everything. Why are they going around getting collection fees? It's to protect him. Why? Why are you protecting him from unfortunate incidents? It's like, oh, so this
It's really
is just
nice of them. It's really nice of them, though. I mean, I hear you trying to beat down on the guys, but I mean, they're just trying to provide protection to the motorists. That's all. Like, you know, and it's a very dangerous place inside of Africa. Like, if you drive down the road, you could be in some severe danger. People could try to rob you for money. So, if paying them the money as protection, I mean, they're just doing a good deed.
man, and also they're doing a good deed by reminding folks that don't pay, by beating them around and shambocking them a little bit, like that
Oh
helps a
no,
little.
no, they don't do anything like that. They're just a union.
What's with the gunshots? Like, remember that part, man, where like the chaos started? All of a sudden there appears to be gunshots. Like, what's up with this?
Yeah, really. I can only imagine how hard it is to make a living in most places in Africa. So, obviously I don't condone like crime and corruption, obviously, but it's kind of easier to see how people turn to that in places like Africa. Like, these gangs like form and they start like doing a protection racket and all these like extortion schemes and stuff like that because there's not too many ways to make money.
Yeah, and also, like I see a few people saying like something about the protection rights, folks. The protection racket deal is like, pay me so I don't beat your ass. That's literally like the whole encompassing of a protection racket. That's the premise of it. And it's like that's literally just a scam. It's like you basically are paying to not have someone come and like throw a Molotov or a bomb in your shop or like try and beat you up or kill you or something. It's like that's the whole thing about a protection racket. You know, it's pretty extreme corruption at that point. But like also I see some people saying, well, you know, like, you know, the corruption's different here in America. I see some people saying we have like a different kind of corruption. We do. It's different, but is it really any different than Ukraine's at this point? Like, you know, like people say, oh, in Ukraine you can bribe government officials to get what you want. It's like, yeah, I can list like maybe 5 incidents like that have happened probably in the last month here in America at very high levels, like where it's just almost broad daylight kind of stuff going on. It's like it's quite obvious. So it's like, you know, is there really a reason to like smack Ukraine for that? Not really, because it's like we have the same problem. And they're like, oh well, you can pay lower government officials, you can pay border guards to illegally cross the border. It's like, yeah, people, you know, bribe folks here in the United States. It's against the law in Ukraine, much as it is here, but people still do it. It's like, what are we supposed to do? Not support a common ally against a common enemy because they have corruption and we have corruption? As like, you know, if we were an incorruptible nation filled with super people that literally had no vices and no corruption, then I'd say maybe we have a point not to support Ukraine. But the fact that there is corruption that goes on here and it's quite prevalent and quite in the open at this point, it's like, is there really an argument to be had that we shouldn't support corrupt countries because we're basically one ourselves?
Yeah, I would agree.
I would agree 100%. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Barry Pies, who puts in a 10 and said, a movie recommendation, How I Unleashed World War II, a comedy about a Polish soldier who is convinced that he started World War II. And all 3 parts are on YouTube with English subtitles, and it starts on the train station.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I will have to take a look at that one. That one actually sounds quite interesting there. So I will have to take it. I'll have to take a little gander at that one, a little gander. And so a humongous thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Ulf Hednar, who said, could there be a mutiny on the USS Abe Lincoln, and especially with abysmal conditions and morale? And if I was in their position, I'd be thinking about it.
They probably were thinking about it quite heavily. One thing that is interesting about U.S. naval history is that there has never been a mutiny in U.S. naval history. I think it's the only navy in the entirety of the world that still gets claim to that. Well, there's a couple in the modern day that get that claim, like the German Navy and the French Navy in its modern form, and the Ukrainian Navy, which I don't think has ever had an active mutiny either. But the U.S. Navy is the longest standing Navy, I think, that has not had a mutiny in history. But that's not to say it cannot happen. If the conditions got bad enough and the morale got low enough, there could be a mutiny of some sort. So I would say it's not out of the question. I don't know if they were getting close to doing that, but considering that a couple of them were jumping overboard to try and get out of the conditions, we could understand that a lot of them mentally were feeling like they were absolute dire straits, which could lead them to mutiny. So a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
Also, a big shout out to Plazat, who put in a 4, and thank you very much, Plazat, as always, for the support and helping to keep the channel running. And also, a big shout out to Anonymous, who put in a 2, literally just Anonymous, and we do appreciate you as well for the $2 support. And we also have a 5 from Wired by Waylon, who said, I was working in Salt Lake City at the Tesoro refinery during a solar eclipse in 2016, and all the Navajo guys called in. No food, no outside until it was over. It was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Well, let's see here. What refinery is that? The Tesoro refinery. That must be north of the city where all those refineries are at. Which one is it? Which one is it? Is it this one? This is the Marathon
I don't know.
Petroleum Refinery.
Punch in Tesoro.
I just don't like to, man. It makes me feel not good because we ain't able to geolocate it properly. That's Big West Oil right here. Chevron was down there. It's got to be this one then. No, that's not one of them, actually. The Tesoro. Is this it? This is the hall. Okay, we're going to have to type it in because all the ones I'm thinking of, it isn't it. Tesoro Refinery. Where is it? Permanently closed? Oh, apparently it's now the Marathon Refinery.
Oh, okay, it's a Marathon then. I know where that one's at.
This one's right here, actually. This one's right next to that big deadline for the Union Pacific. They have hundreds, folks, hundreds of SD-70s from the Union Pacific that just sit here in this yard, and they're just sitting out here rotting. I don't know if they're like planning on bringing these back into service at some point, or if they're just sitting there waiting for a scrapper to buy them. But there's literally hundreds of these things out here. It's actually mental to see. But beyond that, though, that's pretty cool, actually. We've passed by that many a times on the front runner. It actually loops right by it here on this track. And so you get to see the whole refinery, and they usually have these little MP-15s, GATX leasers that are just sitting out here waiting for some sort of an order to pull a car around or push something in the refinery. But that's pretty cool, actually. That's really neat to hear you were here for the eclipse way back in the old 2016. That was 10 years ago at this point. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Game Theory. You said, did you know that Missouri has no capital gains tax?
I didn't. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but where they really get you, though, is on the federal level. So even if you live there and the state doesn't tax it, the feds are going to get you.
Man, and also they always have those hidden taxes, because you hear stuff about Texas, it's like, oh wow, they have like, what is it, no state income tax in Texas?
Yeah, it's no state income tax, but their property taxes are outrageous.
Yeah, they have property taxes, they have mud taxes, they have everything. The thing is, folks, is that if you hear that a state doesn't have sales taxes, it's too good to be true. It quite truly is. They have a whole bunch of other little taxes.
Income.
Oh, a little income tax. Yeah, sorry. Whoopsie daisy there. Must have said
I
that wrong.
was going to say, they definitely have sales taxes. Trust me, everybody's got that.
If they have no income tax and you're like, oh wow, I can save so much money, you're not going to save money. It's basically like the political equivalent of a scam, because you're going to move there thinking you're saving thousands of dollars, and then they're going to get you with all of the tiny little taxes that they have that make up for that, and you're basically paying the same amount, if not more, in other taxes. And also,
Yeah.
like, Texas is toll booth hell. They have toll roads everywhere in Texas.
Unless you're not a property owner, if you don't own a home, you're coming out much stronger if you are simply like working out of a rental or something like that. But also, someone said, "What's a mud tax?" That's a municipal urban development tax. Whenever a city builds a new area or like a new neighborhood or something like that, they can put a what's known as a mud tax on it, and basically you pay that on top of your property taxes. It basically increases the rate that you're paying for the property taxes, which is it can be significant depending on like how much they're charging. So in Texas, that's a real significant deal. Like you have to check and see if mud taxes are included with your property taxes or not, because they can just gouge the hell out of you with those, and it's dramatically higher than anywhere else.
Yeah, so you're quite basically with the mud tax, you're quite literally paying for the installation cost of the city's utilities that were just made, and that could go on for quite a while until they pay it off, or they could keep it going to even raise more revenue for a little while afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. Not an incredibly long period afterwards, but to just raise more revenue for the city. So it like, it's like Texas sounds cool until you know about all of those taxes, and then they get your ass pretty good with them. It's like, they get you nice and good with them. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have another 5 from Game Theory. Said Oregon has no sales tax.
That's pretty cool. Oregon
Are you
is.
sure?
I mean, I don't know, man. I'm just taking their word for it.
Does Oregon have sales tax?
Do they?
Oregon does not have a general statewide or local sales tax. It's one of 5 states with no sales tax on everyday retail purchases. Well, that's news to me. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Pack
Apparently,
up
though,
your
for
bags.
marijuana, though.
We're moving to Oregon. Oh, man.
Apparently, though, for marijuana, though, they put a 17% state tax on it. So it looks like if you're into that, they're gonna try to get you with that right there. Also, lodging. So there's some exceptions to it, but generally no sales tax for the most part. That is interesting, though. I didn't know that was really a thing. I thought every state had sales tax.
Man, that is pretty interesting. There's not really a lot in Oregon. It's basically just Portland. Like if Oregon is basically just Portland, and then there's a couple of other cities around. Like some people will be, oh, it's not just Portland. They have Salem. Salem isn't that big. Like Salem is like a medium-sized Alabama city. Like it's not incredibly big. And then Bend, Oregon is quite small as well, which is like I think the biggest city on the other side of the mountain range here that makes up Mount Hood and the Willamette National Forest and all that. I think that's the biggest city on the east side of that mountain range. So there's basically nothing and nobody living in Oregon. It's a very population sparse sort of a place. Washington State's kind of like that too, but you got the Seattle to Olympia kind of like metropolis area, and that place is loaded with people. But
Oh
anyways,
yeah. There's something that they don't talk about these days in America anymore. They talk about all these taxes. They say, sir, there's taxes here, taxes there, etc. Cut the taxes, sir, cut the taxes. But they never cut the taxes. But they're adding taxes though. There's a new invisible tax called the mental tax that you don't even realize is taxing you until later on down the road. You never get an invoice or a bill for it. Like there's no agency for it. But it does show up though. It does show up. Like when you wake up some mornings, you're like, why am I so foggy feeling this morning? That's the mental tax. It's coming into play.
man, honestly, man, that one I deal with every day. Like, man, the sad reality. Deal with it every day. Very sad, very sad. Many such cases, many such cases. But yeah, I mean, Oregon doesn't really have a lot going on, to be honest. It's just kind of like wilderness in one city, and that's about it. But I guess Washington's kind of like that. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to your support and help with this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, it looks like we have one more.
Yeah, we do. We have one from Trans Canada who put in it too and said the province of Alberta has no sales tax either.
Y'all are also rat-free, which is kind of a cool fact about Alberta. Did you know that, Matthew? They are rat-free.
Rat free, no snitches.
There are no... Oh, man, you a damn rat. It's like, man, the people are loyal in Alberta. Man,
I'll tell you what, the most successful gangs, Canadian gangs, the most successful gangs, they have bad people that are not so great. Those Albertans, they have bad stuff going on. Alberta, that's what they call it. They don't call it that for a reason. It's something named that way arbitrarily. He would never say that word arbitrarily. It's too big of a word, too big of a vocabulary, sir. It has to be really, really light, really elementary, dear data. But it's Alberta, sir. They have Mounties. They do Mountie. That's what they do up there. Mountie. Horses, too. Horses. Run them over with the horses, sir. They said, sir, they know how to ride those. Look at them ride those horses, sir. Those horses are so cute. Look at those horses. Look at those workers. So cute.
I gotta tell you, one time I went up to Alberta and they made national news because they found a rat and I had to go get that rat. I broke into the animal control building and I got the rat and I turned it into soup. It was
Listen, Bobby. Don't mess with the rats. Leave them alone. Don't touch the rats. They carry plague. They have plague, those rats. You got to watch them. They have fleas, too. They jump off and spread. That's what they do, sir. They spread like rats. They call them demerats. They call them demerats, sir. Demon rats, actually. That's what they call them, demon rats. They jump on people. It's not good the way they jump on people. Sir, they start chewing. They start chewing, sir. That's not good when they start chewing. That's a bad thing. They start chewing through everything, those demon rats.
Hi everyone, it's Bob Lindell from Y Pillow, and this thing is rigged. Man, seeing the people from up there.
He doesn't have lumpy pillows. Don't accuse him of that. You can accuse him of anything you want, but you can't accuse him of having lumpy pillows. That triggers him something awful. I've never seen him get triggered quite like a lumpy pillow. I guess that's a bad complaint. That seems like the dog that yelps the loudest is the one that got hit. That's what it sounds like.
You know, it's not just lumpy pillows that get that guy angry. It's also losing primaries. Like, apparently that's also another trigger for him, because he was going off, man. I mean, like, I'm not getting into that kind of stuff like on air, folks, but I will tell y'all that guy completely lost it, and started to allege that the computer voting machine deals are still messed up or something, and it's like, okay. But beyond that, though, beyond that, Alberta is rat-free. Getting back to like the serious part of this, Alberta has no rats. Like every corner of the world except for Antarctica has rats, but Alberta prides itself on being rat-free. Whenever a rat shows up in any city in Alberta, it literally hits the provincial news. Like, it hits the whole province. It even hits the country sometimes.
That's what they do. That's what they do in Atlanta, Georgia, too. When a rat shows up, they said, sir, there's a rat that gets around the community very fast. It's a very fast operation. Sir, they said, there's a rat over on the block. They said, it's not good. That's not good. And then they go out and they take a look at the rat, and it's a bad sight when they look at rats. They don't like seeing rats. It's an ugly time.
I went down to Atlanta one time and they said, sir, you have to see the rats. They're into mumble rap now. They're really working hard. Like, they're out there, they're snitching on their whole gang to make sure they can keep making hit records. Really something else. Anyways, we've been having too much fun here, Matthew. Fun police, we have to stop. And aye, Captain, that's an order. And so with that, it is time for us to move on and into the live chats, I
Yes,
think?
it's time for some live chat questions and Morse code decoders. And we have our entire roster of Morse code decoders. We have Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, her Royal Fluffiness, Coach Commander Sire, and Brian. They said a Morse code said goodbye to the Navy that never sails. It looks like some of them will be going to the dry dock, LOL, and LSA.
And that is the sound of money. Holy smokes, folks. Y'all got that right again. I gotta say, that is quite impressive. Very impressive that y'all keep getting that right time and time again. Truly incredible. Y'all do not even know. And I gotta congratulate y'all greatly, Smurfs and Encore, for getting that correct time and time again. Y'all are always getting that right. It's always incredible. And so a huge shout out to y'all once again. And believe it or not, folks, we have another super chat. Man, to get to it, what do we got?
This one goes to Omnis Intel, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Omnis, as well. They said New Hampshire has 0 sales tax, 0 income tax, 0 vehicle inspections, 0 vehicle emissions, and near 0 state firearms laws. New Hampshire? Are we talking about the same New Hampshire? But they said also flock cameras are against the state constitution. I love my state. And is that really the case, too? I haven't heard this. I have not heard this. New Hampshire, they call it New Hampshire, sir. But I've never been to New Hampshire. It's a small state. It's an unknown state. Some say it's a small one. Some say it's a big one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, I didn't know this about New Hampshire. You know, I heard a lot about Vermont. The top 1% of this country owns half of this country's wealth. But I never heard of New Hampshire. You know, you never think of New Hampshire.
You know what some people have in common with those that live in Vermont?
They getting that cheese like they from Vermont.
Yeah, that's what they do. Some people out there really getting that cheese. You know what I'm saying? They really have a lot in common with the Vermontanese. What do they call a person from Vermont?
A Vermonter? I would assume. Let's see. People from
The Vermontanese
are called Vermonters. So they are called Vermonters. Apparently,
Yeah.
You can call it local and informal terms are flatlanders and woodchuck. Don't know where that one comes in.
Man. Sounds like a slur or something. I don't know about that.
You damn woodchuck. It's like, where the hell did that one come from? Like, man, that's why I hesitated to read it, man. I was like, that almost sounds like a slur or something. It's like, man. Oh my God, man. Like, imagine.
Boys, I always didn't like you woodchucks. It's like, damn. It's like, what are we talking about here?
You sons of bitches coming across the Vermonese border. You damn woodchuckers. It's like, what the hell? It's like, bro, what a slang term for a group of people. Man, that's apparently just casual, apparently, according to the answer online. But anyways, let's look at Concord, by the way. I think that's the state capital, right? So let's look here. Let's see what the state looks like. Let's see if it reflects. Oh, wow. Actually, this is actually quite nice, honestly. It's not like...
Yeah, this is where Paul Revere wrote them.
No, man, he wrote them down in Massachusetts, man, down near Boston.
Now I think he went to Lexington to Concord.
And it's all in Massachusetts, man.
Yeah, I mean,
God
it's all
bless
like
your
it's all
soul.
Well, listen here. It's all about the spirit of Paul Revere. It's not about all the specifics. You're trying to tamp down his legacy. He was everywhere, if you really think about it.
Bro, was he an omniscient god? Bro, he made it like 4 miles out of the city.
That's the way I was told. I was taught this way back in Alabama. They said, Paul Revere, he was riding that one route, but he rung out across the whole area. Like he wasn't just in that one route. He was like they heard him, all over.
Man, it's not actually that impressive. He also got arrested, by the way, when he got like right out of the city. He got like 4 miles away from where he started. I think the British stopped him and detained him or something, and another rider had to continue on the journey. Like that whole like poem, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere and all that by Longfellow. That really way overblew his contribution to the whole deal. It's like there were like 4 or 5 different riders. He was just the first one, and he got detained. The rest of them didn't. Like he was pretty bad at it. But the other rider went on, and also, man, it wasn't even that damn far. I mean, look at this. Here's Boston. That's Lexington. And that's Concord. They're literally suburbs now. That's how far away these things are from Boston. It wasn't like he went on some journey or some shit. I mean, he literally got stopped in what is modern day Somerville and got arrested. So he didn't
Yeah.
even make it out of downtown in the modern day.
Yeah, can you imagine getting arrested in the burbs? Like that's not exactly what you'd call clout, right there, to say the least. He could at least got arrested downtown or at least in the hood.
Man, he could have gotten I don't know where the hood is up in this place. Man, I wish I knew because that way I could make a good local joke that would get some people pissed off. It's
Man,
not a
Paul,
hood.
Paul
Like,
Revere, Paul Revere was trying to be hard in the burbs. He was out there trying to like look at gangster out there in the suburbs. Man, I'll tell you.
man, they said, one it by land, two it by sea. And he said, oh, damn. He made it only 4 miles. Man, let's see. Where's the Old North Church that he saw? There it is. There's the Old North Church. I think he was somewhere on this side. By the way, this used to be Bunker Hill. It's a giant-ass suburb as well now. That's where the famous Battle of Bunker Hill happened, which was once a hill. No longer a hill now. But anyways, he saw the light from the Old North Church, and he went, damn, I gotta go tell the boys. He made it to about modern-day Springville, and he got arrested. So he did not make it far. Like, he made it
Why
nowhere.
didn't he just telegraph it? He could have just telegraphed it.
Honestly, man, I was thinking he could just open up his phone and text someone and be like, hey, they're on the way. Like 12 is in the building or something like that. He didn't do it.
Yeah, like sliding the DMs and let them know they're coming. Hey,
Man,
the British are sliding up on the block. You might want to go and go hide.
man, he sits there, like slides in the DM. Hey, yo, my blood, on God, G, they coming for the guns, blood. Go put them away. And then he goes, slides over on Snapchat, takes a little picture of himself. I think I'm gonna go revolution tonight or something like that. Any babes want to go with me or something? It's like I don't even know,
Any
man.
babes want to go with them?
I mean, man, Paul Revere was a player. He was a
Paul
silversmith.
Revere's
He
a
had
player,
that
man.
cash.
Man, I'll tell you, he was a player apparently.
Man, bro, he said my grills ain't the only thing that's silver. Oh man, that's man. Oh man, but man, he's overrated. Like I hate to say it, folks, but Paul Revere's contribution kind of overrated. There was another writer that did like 40 miles or something and literally notified basically the whole of Massachusetts, and they literally got no credit. And Paul Revere got credit for being arrested 4 miles from the Old North Church. It's like kind of lame. I feel like we could have made a poem about the other dude who did like 47 miles on a horse nonstop for like almost a full straight 8 hours. Like that seems like something else. But beyond that though, getting back up to Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, let's check out Manchester. One more city, just to take a gander. What does it look like? This is a back alley, so I need to get out on the main street. So we're like, Manchester. Manchester kind of looking like Manchester, England. Like they about to scrunch you up, clounce like, and I mean it's all right. But I have to say, Concord, New Hampshire was kind of nicer looking, but still really interesting. I did not know that about the state of New Hampshire.
Indeed. Also, Game Theory put in another Super J, put in a 5 and said, I got you beat. California has sales tax, homeless, property tax, income tax, and trains to nowhere. Beat you. Honestly, like people hate on California. Like I will say their taxes are outrageous. Like just for the taxes alone and also the high cost of living, I pretty much ruled California out a long time ago because of those two things. But California, I mean, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Like I guess the inner urban areas are pretty bad. Like, but any downtown these days. I mean, American downtowns and cities are in really foul shape. Like pretty much anywhere you go. So it's the same way in California for the most part. Just a couple of quirks with the government, like for example, the evictions and stuff like that, not going very smoothly for people that are squatting in places and trying to stay there without paying rent. But it's really not that bad. But you have to have a lot of income to really live comfortably in California, which is not really worth it in my opinion. Like if you can afford it, it would be pretty nice. But if you're somebody that's like, oh, hey, I want to go live in California, it's like unless you have like a really good paying job or something, or you have a job that you just got in California that pays really, really well to match the cost of living, then I just don't really see it. And I think that's why so many people are moving out of California, is because that cost of living is even squeezing the people that used to live there their whole life.
I'll be honest, California is not bad. Like we've been to California, it's not bad. I mean, there's places that are rough, but it's like Alabama had rough places. Utah has rough places. Although I will say Utah doesn't have rough places like Skid Row or like North Birmingham or anything. Like I haven't found that yet in Utah. So that's like a plus for out here. But, California is like any other state. I will say this, though. California has a lot to do compared to most other states. Like, if you live in California, you're paying a lot of money, but you're not going to find, like, a place like LA where there's so many different things that you can do and get involved in. Like, compared to Alabama, there's nothing. And compared to Salt Lake City, there's still even a lot more to do in LA than there is in Salt Lake City. And Salt Lake City has a lot compared to even Birmingham, Alabama. So, it's not like it's got problems, but it's not like world-ending problems. But people are moving out of California for a reason. It's too expensive for most people to live there anymore.
They're
But
moving here to Salt Lake City. That's where they're moving to, actually. That's one of the major places that Californians are flocking to. They're flocking to Dallas. They're flocking to Austin, Texas. They're flocking to Salt Lake City, and some of them are flocking to some more remote places in Montana, like Missoula and stuff like that. And some people are going to Bozeman as well. So there's a huge influx of Californians out of there, not because they hate living in California, but just because they're getting squeezed so bad with the price.
man, and then some of them are flock cameras.
I mean,
Yeah. Oh, man, like, yeah. But yeah, I mean, they just can't afford to live there. I mean, I've run into quite some Californians out here, folks, a couple of them, and Californians aren't bad people. They're nice people. I haven't seen one that is bad yet. I will say though that they do kind of come off artificial, like real shit. Like, man, like
I
they're
don't think so. I was about to say the opposite. Like, I can instantly tell, like out here in Salt Lake City, if somebody is not from Utah. I will say this: Utah is not a very diverse place. Like, it's very homogenous, like very much so. Which, I mean, that's fine if that's what a state is. I mean, we knew that before you moved out here. But it's not like you don't have like a whole bunch of different types of like different like groups of people. Really, it's very homogenous in one way. So California has more like diversity to it, like where it's more like, interesting or fascinating to a certain degree. But like I said, the cost of living is outrageous and crazy. And to even get like an apartment or something, just like a small studio apartment, you're paying the same we're paying out here for like a normal, unit of a larger degree.
Yeah, but I mean, like the thing is though, like with Californians though, like what I mean is like they kind of come off as artificial. And I saw Misty say, "What?" I'm not like throwing any shade. It's just that like Californians are so like overly nice that it almost comes off as like animated, really. Because like the few that I've run into, they're like, "Oh hey, hey!" It's like, oh man, it's like I'm like kind of like that myself. But it's like that's like so like over the top. It's like damn. It's like that it's like that is very nice, like super nice, or it's animated. I'm not sure which. But like and then there's the other group out here in Salt Lake City, which is the Mormons. Like, and they'll be like, "Hi," like, hang on, let me do it right. "Hi, how are you doing? You know, my daughter is going on a mission trip. Would you like to become friends?" It's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, sure. Oh, would you like to hear about the prophet Joseph Smith? Not really. Like, it's like, not quite. Like, if I'm being
Always
completely,
friendly though.
they
Like
are quite friendly.
it's always friendly. Like that's a very refreshing thing. Is some places you go, not there's not too many friendly people. Like you go around places, you might get like maybe somebody on the verge of cussing you out. Like depending on which place you go around the country, there's definitely some places that are not so friendly. I can attest to that. In the South, there were some places there that you go to and it was not friendly at all. You didn't know if you're going to get somebody going off and chewing you out, or they're going to be friendly or not. Out here in Utah, I really haven't had like negative experiences with people for the most part. Like, even if it turns out that they don't really click with you right or something like that, it's still friendly. Like, even with that, which is fine. I'm like, that's better than somebody being an asshole or something like that. If they're like, "I don't like this person," and they start cussing you out or something like that, it's still better for it to be friendly.
Man, honestly, folks, I would say one like I am very happy in Utah. Very happy with it. I've enjoyed it greatly. I haven't really had any complaints. And I plan on staying here, folks, until the lake dries up, which I hope doesn't happen. But the only place that I'd really think about moving from here would probably be into some city in western Colorado in the Rockies, but those are so insanely expensive that it's impossible, financially infeasible. So I would have to stay here. And also on top of that, the other thing is like, yeah, it'd be cool to live in the Rockies in like one of those towns, but what is there really to do in a place like Aspen? There's not really a lot there. It's basically like a ski town. And that's the other detractor, is that in Salt Lake, there's a lot to do. So many different things to do. something for everyone. So if you ever wanted to like change hobbies or interests or kind of dabble in something else, there's something here for that. And the mountains are quite literally 30 minutes drive from anyone in the city, so you can get right into them and get at them. You really can't do that in Colorado, like in the Rockies, places like that, and it's really expensive. So like generally, honestly, I would say I'm staying in Salt Lake City until that lake dries up. And hopefully that won't happen in my lifetime. So that's at least my plan, folks. That's my 2 cent plan. That's my 10 cent army. But that's my 10 cent plan. Is to stay here in Salt Lake City. It's nice. It's nice, and the people are nice. But anyways,
Yeah.
with that, we are on, I think, to the third to last question of the night.
We also have a super chat from Game
Oh.
Theory, but in a 5. They said, I knew somebody was about to ask this question. I knew somebody was about to say this. They said, how are the ladies in Utah? Now, here's the thing. I saw a Big Machine to say this in the live chat. He said, Mormons are nice, but they're always with the motive of converting you. Not always. Like, I found out that there's a range of Mormons. There's Mormons that are extremely zealous, like extremely much so, like any religion. Like if you have Christianity, there's very like zealous Christians out there that are like extreme to the point where even other Christians will look at them like, what is wrong with those people? Like there's something not quite right there. There's the very zealous ones. Then there's the ones that are like basically Mormon in name only, where they really don't adhere to anything that they have been taught, and they just say that, and it's kind of like just somebody that claims to be Christian. They really don't they're not religious at all or anything like that. And then there's like the middle road a little bit, where it's like kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of thing. There's a huge thing out here apparently where it's not as popular as it used to be apparently to be Mormon from the looks of it. Like, and it seems like the church population, at least from what I've heard, is going down quite a bit and stuff like that, which is also a trend nationwide religiously in pretty much every religion. There's a lot of people that are, the newer generation, like in our generation, that are no longer religious for whatever reason. I'm not sure what's causing that, but it seems like a lot of people really aren't going for that anymore for the most part. So as Apex Janitor said, kind of lukewarm. It kind of is. Like they have that. I didn't know. I thought you had to be all in or all out. I didn't know it was like you could have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But apparently that's a thing. So I would say, how are the ladies? I would say pretty decent. I'll just have to leave it at that. But Enforcer, what say you?
What the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean? You gotta elaborate. Like, pretty decent. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what Game Theory means by how are the ladies. Like, what are we talking about? Like, we're talking about attractiveness, or are we talking about like personality? Like, what are we talking? I mean, it's the same as anywhere. I mean, some are good, and some are, you want to run. Like, it's pretty much like anywhere.
Some of them, I'm sure. I wouldn't really know, folks. I haven't been looking around. I'm to put it in one way, I'm good. Like, but beyond that though, it's like some like anywhere, it's people are people. So some of them are going to be great, and some of them are going to have more red flags than the Soviet Union, like a lot of dudes. Like, so it's like I wouldn't personally know. I haven't been wandering around like checking all that stuff out, but honestly,
I've seen some crazy ones. Just like anywhere though.
Yeah.
I've seen some crazy ones, definitely. But I mean, that's like anywhere though. I mean, if you look long enough, you'll find crazy of anywhere you go if you look hard enough.
Yeah, it's like but the thing is like it's like if you're talking about like girls, it's like there's some crazy ones. It's like, yeah, but there's some crazy ass dudes out there. It's like there's some wild ass dudes. Like it's like. That's kind of just a fact of life, to be honest with folks, because everyone, like, some dudes always want to say, oh, all the women are messed up these days, and then some women want to be like, all men are pigs. It's like, honestly, it's like it's a mixed bag. It's just people are people, so you're gonna run into assholes of all types. It's like man or woman. It's like that's how I look at it, at least with that whole deal. It's like it's not really like a gender or a sex specific problem. It's more so a problem with just people in general. Like half of them are asses and have a lot of red flags.
Now, one thing I will say, I see some people saying here that Utah is not. And I'm just speaking from very surface level knowledge here to a certain degree. In Utah, there is not really this whole like wild and loose thing going on here, which honestly for me is a bigger deal because I've never been like that, just to be fully transparent. But some place you go, it's just a free for all. Like it's just debauchery gone wild to a certain degree. I'm obviously not Mormon, but it's like I do appreciate like the place is not a free for all for the most part. It's a lot more, reserved for the most part, and it's not absolutely insane and crazy with that. So that's pretty nice. I like that aspect of it. It feels family friendly. I guess that's the way to say it. It feels more family friendly than
Yeah.
it does like, you walk around someplace and you're like, dang, you might see somebody like getting way too fresh on a sidewalk somewhere or something like that in other cities, and you're like, that's not really great. Like, I don't want to really have to see that, but you don't really see it out here in Utah.
Yeah, you don't really see that out here. I personally say, folks, like some people are like, "Oh, you got to have the party scene." Honestly, I'm fine. I've never been into it, and honestly, I kind of find that stuff kind of overstimulating. Like being in a huge crowd of people with loud ass lights and flashing like lights and stuff, and loud ass music and all. And it's like that's just not really my thing. And also trying to get like blasted in the middle of that drunk, it's like, it's not really my thing. They don't really have that out here, so and also, they don't really drink out here either, and I don't really drink anyway. So, that kind of all works out in the end. It didn't really affect me or Matthew, I don't think, at all, moving out here. Um, but I'll say this though, as far as Salt Lake City goes, I haven't personally been looking. I don't really need to look, to put it that way. I don't need to look. But beyond that though, I would assume they're all right. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And I believe we're now finally into the live chats, and I think we're on to the third to last one of the night, if I'm not mistaken.
And we have one more super chat. It goes to
Oh,
Travis Newhouse, who put in a 5 and said, "Go watch some Huell Hauser if you want to see what California's like. It's old, but there's some places that are still around on YouTube."
interesting. I'll take a look at that. I've seen a lot of things that have come out of California. Um, but California isn't all that bad. It's just kind of going through a rut. A lot of places in America are going through a rut. Alabama was going through one. I can tell you that. In its own way. Like Alabama's going through the Republican rut. California's going through the Democrat rut. It's where politicians basically create a dynasty inside of their state and they get to run it into the ground in a simple sense. And I wish that people would realize that, and work against it and just start voting for different parties to keep the variety going and to make the politicians feel they have to compete for your vote. But nobody does that anymore these days. I mean, that's a fleeting hope. I wish people would, but they don't. So I'd have to say I'll have to take a look at that though. I will be interested to see what it shows. Because a lot of interesting people are from California. I mean, Richard Nixon was from California. If nobody knows, did you know that Nixon was a Quaker?
Quaker, eh?
Yeah, like the Quaker Oats guy, like a Quaker, like that. Like his family raised him as a Quaker.
Interesting.
Yeah, pretty interesting, weird stuff. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
And moving into our live chat questions, our third to last one here is going to go to Uncovered Cube, who said, "Why are the Gush guns ineffective against the drones that Ukraine's sending in?"
Because the gunners are terrible. Like they would be quite effective if they hit their target, but the gunners have no clue how to lead a target. And I'm guessing they're putting the reticle right onto whatever they're shooting at, which is inaccurate. You're going to fall behind the target, and that's why they just keep on missing. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one's going to go to Mike C, who said, "Matt, what happened to the subs that they had resting on the bottom of the sub pen submerged?" And they're still there. They didn't get hit, apparently, in this attack. I don't think Ukraine attempted to hit those. They just tried to hit the ships, from the looks of it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine comes back to hit the submarines, because I don't think those drone nets are going to save them. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say same thing. We think they're still at the bottom of the Stochny Island, just sitting there. And apparently they're just chilling like that with the drone nets built over the sails. So nothing really happened to them, and they're just kind of hanging out for now. So I hope that does address it the best we can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is basted with mustard, who said, "Is Iran going to be another forever war, or will the U.S. Pull out in defeat?"
Think they're probably going to try and pull out in defeat, or they're going to wait until the midterms are over and then try and do everything that they can. That might end up happening as well, possibly. So, It's hard to say. Honestly, it's impossible to say because the president could wake up tomorrow and start threatening to bomb him. I will put, you know what, folks? I'll put money on it that within the next 3 days, we're probably going to hear that the president's threatening to bomb him again. We hear that they are planning on doing nothing now, but that doesn't hold. There'll be 3 more days. He'll get bored of doing nothing. He'll threaten to bomb him or something, and we'll be back to that again. So I hate to tell you, I don't really know, but that would be my best guess is maybe we'll end up pulling out in defeat as it looks right now, but that is definitely not certain. So with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of yous, every last one of yous, for being here tonight. Over the course of the entire stream, we had the exact same viewership, no joke, down to the viewer from last night. We had a peak viewership, according to YouTube right now, 16.2 thousand people, and 98,000 people have watched the stream. I kid you not, folks, that's literally like down to like 100, like on the total live viewers and the total viewers over the whole stream, the same number we had last night, which is kind of wild. But we thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world on a brand new war reporting week. This is actually the last day for this map of day 1631 of this week. So if y'all want to access this map, this is going to be the last stream you can access it on. The map completely resets as of tomorrow, and the link will bring you to a whole new one. So I just wanted to let y'all know that if you want to see this one, this is the last day y'all are going to see it as a clickable link below the video. But with that, we will see you all tomorrow to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, which I'm going to be trying to make one tomorrow, it will be me making that short war video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukrainian, Ram Slava, long live the Late Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly Warning stream. And who knows what the heck's going to happen tomorrow? You never can tell. So be sure to tune in at 10 p.m. Eastern for that stream once again tomorrow. And maybe, hopefully, the Enforcer can make a short war video tomorrow. We have to get back to that. And the news is slim midday these days, like because it's a bit of a downturn and with the news cycle right now. But I hope we can get one out tomorrow, hopefully. So as I see a lot of people asking for those, and hopefully we can get one out. But in the meantime, though, a big shout out to the over 100,000 people that have been watching so far tonight. And I hope to see you all once again tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.